A crowd was gathering at a popular local establishment to watch the trial of a Federation protagonist. Professor Chiao entered the bar to knock back a glass of strong drink and catch up on the local news. Like the others in the bar, he was interested in the big news of the day. He walked over to the bar. There was a familiar bartender behind it, who asked him about today's harvest. He grudgingly replied that only the skin and fangs of a wolf had been obtained today. He turned his attention to the main screen in the establishment. It was the beginning of what everyone had gathered for. The big news was the trial for murder. The lost Musk case. Musk was a code name. The congressman's vote was over, and now everyone had to hear the verdict. 325 Piat votes were in favor, no one voted against, and no one abstained. On the 7th year of the new calendar, judgment was handed down in the case of the lost mask. Parliament President. He Yao said that a lot of evidence has been found about Musk committing extremely brutal murders during the war. Musk was a code name. He was also accused of attacking friendly camps and shooting more than 30,000 people. In connection with this, Musk was sentenced to death. But it was only because of his past actions that it was decided to commute his sentence. Parliament decided to strip Musk of the titles of Supreme Leader of the Commonwealth and High Marshal, but keep the title of Special Hero. Since Musk was the only special hero for an entire Commonwealth, he had to return to the battlefield if necessary. People's opinions on this were divided. Some really considered him a hero. Others wished him dead. The President of Parliament suggested that Musk leave the place as a hero because of his services in the fight against mutants. Suddenly, it was as if time had stopped. Musk didn't understand why he was here. He felt as if his life had been ended by the Night Lord's sudden attack. This place was familiar to him. It was here that he had been betrayed and condemned by his own partners. He supposed that at this hour his whole life was passing before his eyes. Suddenly a scoreboard appeared in front of him. There were several variants of events on it. Turns out Musk has been reborn and is once again at the crossroads of a historic upheaval. Now, he had to choose between two options. The way of the hero or the way of the monster. And this time, he decides to choose the latter. In a past life, Musk was a hero with extraordinary abilities who led humanity out of the darkness, which has become a relic of the old days. He kept mankind from moving on, and now he's been banished from everywhere. The entire Congress wished Musk would accept the verdict and leave them, isolating himself from society forever. But suddenly he said he disagreed with the verdict. Everyone froze at that answer. But he said again that he refused to be a hero. The president was beyond furious. He couldn't believe that Musk was serious. Max tired out of his chair and headed for the door, saying he was tired of being a hero. The president said he could not afford such behavior. Otherwise, he must give up his powers. This statement shocked all the citizens. No one had ever thought that one's power could be given up. Musk had the 13th rank. This was 4 ranks higher than President He Yao. He was in 2nd place. No one in the Commonwealth has ever been able to pass a realm higher than the 10th rank, and it's unlikely that anyone will. The atmosphere was tense. The president insisted that Musk make a decision, and then he decided to agree and give up his powers so that no one else would dare tell him what to do. Everyone was shocked when they saw that he was dead serious about giving up his powers. He raised his hand to the top, and through it all, his power began to flow outward. It was so powerful that it harmed everyone in the vicinity. Even the president, being at the 9th rank, had to use all his strength to resist the urge to fall on his knees before him. Musk said they asked for his power back on their own. The wave of his power broke through the ceiling and rushed out of the building. All the locals began to seek shelter. In just a few minutes, there was no one left in Congress but the president. And when it was all over, he was happy with this course of events, because now he is the most powerful, and he cannot be afraid of the mask. Musk dropped his mask and was no longer a hero to himself or the others. Even so, Musk did not leave like a normal person, but disappeared by teleportation. That meant he had some opportunities left that no one, not even the president, had a clue about. Meanwhile, a few professionals arrived at the level 3 area called Female Spider's Nest. It was a team called the Steelcutters. All of its members were at least level 2. In this secret area, the thing they should fear the most are the spiders, the 3rd-level boss spiders. They are rumored to be larger than a human. The youngest on this team was Yan. She was a little afraid of spiders. The team decided to take advantage of the fact that all the professionals had left to watch Musk's trial and go to this secret area. The captain gave instructions to move forward. He was determined to do a good job and get through quickly. Suddenly they heard a sound that meant someone else was arriving in this dungeon. They stayed to see who it was. But no one wanted to share the opportunity to hunt in this place with anyone else. They saw it was just one guy. He looked like a simpleton without any equipment. The mask was filled with nostalgia. It was the first time he had entered a dungeon like this since he had been reborn, and it was there that he had encountered an unknown monster deity. After he was reborn, the system decided to bring him here. His past life had shown that the hero's path was incapable of saving humanity. And now he wondered where that path would lead him. The captain inquired as to Musk's purpose in coming to the dungeon. If he planned to go through it, then where were his weapons? He showed his fists, and said in all seriousness that these were his weapons. The captain then assumed that the guy was a martial arts master. He asked what level he was at. He was afraid that the guy might possess the same 3rd level, because in that case, he would get a decent portion of the reward. And Musk answered with all confidence that he has a level 1. The captain and his crew were very surprised. It seemed insane to enter this dungeon with such a level. He wouldn't even be able to overpower level 2 hitmen. Healers are the team members who are responsible for healing. They recommended that masks stay out of the way, and to wait for the dungeon exit to open when they were done. The captain added that newcomers had no chance of winning this dungeon, and warned him that if he decided to take a chance and go into battle, neither he nor his team would help the guy. After making sure no one claimed their bounty, the captain gave the command to move forward. Suddenly, there was a huge explosion in the cave and huge spiders fell from there. The team immediately began the battle. The captain went on the attack, and the others covered him. There were many more monsters, and they outnumbered the professionals by several times their size. But despite that, the team members were killing the monsters one by one very quickly. Musk was watching everything from the sidelines, and had no plans to get involved in the fight yet. But as it turned out, one of the steel cutters didn't fight the spiders. She stayed with Musk. She told the boy not to take the captain's words to heart. Rookies do make a lot of mistakes very often. She warned him to be careful, or he would die very quickly. Musk has noticed that current professionals have become more advanced and sharp, which deserves respect. The girl said that although he looked young, he spoke as if he was one of the top of the Commonwealth. She added that the guy's right. Because of the special training that Musk has created, the death rate among professionals has decreased significantly. The girl remembered that she forgot to introduce herself. She extended her hand and said that her name was Yan Qian Qian Qian. She is a 2nd-level hitman. The guy said his name was Xiao Chu. He was a 1st-level professional and still had to choose a direction for himself. Suddenly, one of the spiders wanted to strike the girl. Xiao reacted quickly and saved her. It was a shadow spider. He was determined to finish what he'd started and moved even closer. Then Xiao took the attack and grabbed the spider by its huge paw with one hand. In a couple seconds, something happened that no one could have expected. He fractured it in just one motion. After all that, he took the broken-off limb and stabbed the monster right in the eye. The entire cutting steel team was shocked. Even professional martial artists were not capable of such a thing. The guy clearly understood his opponent's body structure and was confident when fighting an opponent of this level. The girl had no time to realize what had happened until Musk reported that the danger had passed. She grasped at the guy so hard she could have strangled him. Musk got a plus 500 experience points. He realized that in his new life he could earn levels as before. The captain thanked Xiao for saving the girl and said that they would share the reward at the end of the mission. It wasn't long before they had to get to the boss. The captain gave the command to use fire to destroy the web. The plan was for him to take everyone on and for the team to attack the boss. The guys were glad they were moving so fast. It meant they would get to see the verdict of the Musk trial. Some of the team wished him dead and thought he was a hypocrite. Others were curious as to what he looked like without the mask. The girl said she used to think he was a hero and doesn't understand how he was able to kill everyone in Tuga City. It was Yan who stood up for the mask sharply. In her opinion, the hero had no choice, because the city was infected, and all the people were turning into monsters. Everyone was surprised and even mocked the girl a little. She was the only one who supported the hero. The captain ordered all to stop this conversation and not to make a show before his guest. The team listened, as they all realized it was time to head to the boss battle. It wasn't long before they approached a place that truly resembled the spider boss's hideout. In their minds, they had already defeated him, and were curious about what was in the gut of his treasure chest, and how much they could sell the monster's body for. It wasn't long before they were met by the long-awaited spider, for the sake of which the team had descended into this dungeon. The captain ordered to follow the plan. He would draw the monster's attention to himself, and the team was to attack it. It was immediately obvious that this was the boss. It was much larger than the spiders they had seen at the beginning of the journey. Each member of the team tried their best to do as much damage to the monster as possible, while the captain distracted him. To all, the plan seemed a success, and pretty soon they were hoping to share the rewards. Musk knew that in the low-level secret areas, the monsters had no intelligence at all. And if you get the timing right, you can easily get rid of it in just a couple strokes. Plus, this team had the element of fire, which these monsters are very afraid of. Meanwhile, Yan was busy healing the captain. He was the one to whom all the spiders' anger was directed. With their combined efforts, they still destroyed the monster. The captain was satisfied because they had succeeded in the third-level dungeon. He said he would divide the reward among everyone as usual, but this time with the stranger in mind. Musk didn't understand why the captain said it was a level 3 dungeon, since the system clearly stated it was level 4. What was also weird was that after the boss died, the treasure chest never appeared. Suddenly they saw someone approaching. They were surprised to see a girl. On her head was something that looked very much like an astronaut's helmet. The captain then assumed that the chest didn't appear because she was the boss of this dungeon. She didn't seem very creepy to the team. It made the spider they defeated seem more intimidating. She made incomprehensible noises and her movements seemed clumsy. Suddenly she began to rush at one of the team members named Lao Chi with all her speed. He pointed his weapon at her to take the attack. But the others thought she would easily be able to dodge such a move. But it wasn't. The spear pierced the girl right through the chest and did very serious damage. He was surprised himself that it had come so easily. It was even alarming. Lao took out his spear to deliver another blow, but cobwebs began to emanate from the wound. In just a couple seconds, that same patina enveloped his hands and completely restrained his movements. It was difficult to get rid of such a thick web, and then the captain ordered the mage to use flames. She immediately followed the order and directed all of her firepower at the enemy. Taking advantage of the moment, the other team members went to retrieve Lao. But the fire was so strong that no one was allowed to get close to the guy. Everyone was wildly shocked when they saw that the girl had several more legs. Her structure resembled the body of a spider. None of them had ever seen anything like it. And while Lao was in pain, they just didn't know how to help him. In an instant, the monster pierced the guy's chest with its foot with all its might. His agony rolled quickly. He died before he realized it. The whole team was shocked at what was happening. They were filled with rage and a desire for revenge. But Musk stopped the guy, saying he would meet the same fate if he acted recklessly. The captain agreed, and ordered a slow retreat to the exit until the portal opened. We had to hold out for 3 hours. Meanwhile, they noticed that the monster continued to approach. He engaged his web again. This time his target was the captain. In an instant, she attacked Tulsi as well. His arrows were useless against the boss's strength. Suddenly, huge clicks grew out of the wound from where the cobwebs appeared. The monster was pulling the guy's web towards him and was going to kill him using that scary maw. It was so scary that Yan couldn't look at it. They froze with fear. A few seconds later, another member of the cutting steel team was brutally killed by the monster. The captain was filled with rage and fear. He realized that he could be next. He was surprised that he, a level 3 swordsman, couldn't manage to deal a single damage to a level 4 monster. It was getting harder and harder to resist the boss. The captain didn't know how to proceed. Then Musk said that in order to survive, the captain would have to cut off his arm. It's the only way. The captain hesitated at first. But then he trusted the boy and threw him his sword. Upon catching it, Musk didn't hesitate for a second and immediately cut off the captain's arm that had been captured by the monster. The captain was gripped by panic and maddening pain. There was blood everywhere, and the dungeon boss didn't expect this course of events, but continued to attack. Musk managed to free the captain and save him from being killed. He took him to Yan for her to do the healing. The mage became very scared. She didn't want to die in a place like this, so she decided to run away. Yan wondered at Xiao why he wasn't running away. It seemed like there wasn't an ounce of fear in him. He replied that it is impossible to hide from the boss. A victim who escapes attracts him even more. The monsters chosen by the gods feed on human negative emotions. It's a delicacy for them. Yan was surprised. This was the first time she had heard of it. She said that there are monsters that are blessed by the void gods. After that, they are extremely strong and fast. They also take on a very strange appearance beyond human comprehension. Suddenly, they saw that the boss was using the poison reflection spell. The poison spread so fast that it filled almost the entire dungeon in a matter of seconds. The mage soon realized that it wasn't poison gas, but a spirit suppression spell. The monster was discouraged because it affected everyone but Xiao. Even though he had gotten rid of his powers, his spirit was at the 14th level. To suppress Xiao, the boss spell was too weak. Literally just now he had gotten a new ability and activated the monster status. After a moment, he had his first monster image and was ready to fight the boss. Ironically, he thanked her for putting a professional to sleep. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to fight a real fight. With incredible speed, he pounced on his opponent. He certainly didn't expect this. and in just a couple seconds, ripped the boss off one of his legs. The boss tried to fight back and let out a huge amount of webbing in hopes that it might help somehow. But Xiao thought it was ridiculous that the gods had chosen a monster with such primitive techniques, but then assumed he was the one with high standards, and shouldn't have expected anything more from a level 4 monster. But that didn't mean he was going to let the boss live at all. He attacked him again, and in just a moment the enemy had only one leg left. He was pathetic and tried to run away, but Xiao couldn't let that happen. Then he ripped off the boss's last leg and he fell to the ground. Xiao thought that when the boss was playing with people, he couldn't even imagine that he would one day be in their shoes. He moved closer and finished off the enemy. Mission accomplished. The survivors were automatically teleported out of the secret location. Only 2 hours had passed since the teleportation, but everything that had happened in the dungeon seemed like a terrifying dream to Yan. Because the captain was wounded, he was immediately taken by ambulance to the hospital. Yan and her sister were not hurt, so they were immediately released home. The girl still hadn't seen Xiaoqiu, so she was very worried about him. After finishing the mission, the system teleported Xiao to the city of Daho. He planned to look for a place to stay for the night. He had no money at all for a place to live. In his previous life, other people took care of such things while he fought monsters. He thought that now he would have to achieve everything on his own. Suddenly, Yan saw him. Turns out he didn't even remember her name. He thought she was just a hillbilly, which really angered the girl. She recalled her name and said she was glad to see Xiao alive. Yan learned that the guy was looking for a place to live in Dahi and that he had no relatives or acquaintances here. Therefore, while talking about the history of the city, she brought Xiao to her home. She said the guy would have his own private room, so no need to worry about the inconvenience. On the house, Xiao saw a medal that belonged to Father Yan. He was a level 5 professional and had fought in many battles. Also, the girl was proud that her father had fought alongside Musk himself. But his father's been drinking lately, so Musk wouldn't want to fight alongside him. Xiao then inquired where her father was now. The girl replied that he was dead. The protracted war had left wounds on his soul that she could not survive. It turned out that the girl was a complete orphan. Her mother died during the birth of her sister. The girl asked not to feel sorry for her. She had come to terms with everything a long time ago, and everything is fine now. Afterward, she invited Xiao into the house, saying that she would provide him with bedding, but he would have to get his pajamas himself. Even though the things in the house were old, it just seemed like heaven to the guy. In his previous life, he had lived at the front practically all the time. He decided that he would pay the rent as soon as he could make a little extra money. Suddenly, he saw a girl in a wheelchair in front of him. She asked who the guy was. It was Yan's sister Qianlu, and she was very unhappy that Yan had brought a stranger into the house. Having voiced her displeasure from the threshold, she went silently into the house. Yan apologized for her sister. In her words, she's good. It's just that today is the trial of Musk, whom she's idolized since she was in diapers. Qianlu went to her room and continued to read the comments about the mass case. She was outraged that many people didn't realize how difficult it was for Musk to be a hero and wished him dead. The girl was overwhelmed with anger. She was sure that people should thank the hero. Yan invited her sister to dinner, especially since they had a guest. But she said that he was not that important, not Musk, and refused to have dinner together. On this day, it was just the two of them having dinner. Yan apologized that the food was very plain, but Xiao was not embarrassed by this. He was grateful for the lodging and dinner. In the past, he had to eat monster meat without seasoning, rice, or anything else. Back then, any food seemed appetizing as long as he realized he was capable of fighting darkness for the sake of humanity. There was a news program on TV. They were discussing Musk's sudden disappearance. It was also said there that his disappearance and denial of powers was made up for the sake of the show. Otherwise, how else could he have disappeared? So residents also worried that Musk's disappearance could affect the global citizenry. But still, most people were convinced that their well-being could not depend on one person. This is clearly a credit to Parliament. That is, humanity will be able to quietly achieve new victories without the help of this hero. Yan was outraged by what was being said on TV. She was sure that Musk had a reason to hide. Yan wondered why Xiao didn't care about this topic at all. Her sister would have smashed the TV if she heard that. Suddenly, threatening shouts started coming from outside the house. They threatened to burn down the house. They were employees of the Kaijiang Investment Company. Yan decided to open the door. Behind her stood 4 huge men, who as it turned out had been looking for the girl for a long time. It was Mr. Zai and Mr. Tujing. They were intent on purchasing the sister's house. They were aware that the girl's team had been disbanded due to the captain's injury and the deaths of the other members. So he hinted that partnering with their company would only benefit her. They gave her 5 days to make a decision. After that time, they said, the conversations would be very different. If Yan agrees to give the land to the company, $100,000 will be immediately transferred to her account. The girl was shocked because initially they offered $3 million, but she was still not going to sell the house. But they cheekily replied that the real estate market is constantly on the move. That's why the price has dropped so much. Then he reminded me that to maintain his sister's health, there should be at least $30,000 in her bank account. So this sum was enough. The girl was about to close the door, but they turned their attention to Sao, who was watching. At first, they assumed that this youngster was Yan's boyfriend. Taejin Kenzo stepped closer to him, introduced himself, and said he would be happy to cooperate in the future. Xiao listened to him and extended his hand towards him to shake Kenzo's hand. Yan was scared since he was a mage who specializes in mental attacks. Xiao didn't know that, and that's why he got caught. Kenzo was very smug. He thought that once he got to the guy's subconscious, his mind would be destroyed. Kenzo planned to give him a minor concussion to keep him unconscious for at least half a month. But he was greatly surprised when he reached Xiao's consciousness. He didn't understand how a person could have such an amount of mental power. Kenzo made the decision to get out of there as soon as possible. But he did not succeed. Suddenly, a huge wave appeared in front of him and covered him with itself. Kenzo realized that the guy was on a completely different level. He was beginning to be consumed by Xiao's mental powers. That's when he realized this guy was a monster. But it was too late to resist. He was at his mercy. In the real world, Tujin was unconscious. His brother didn't understand what had happened to him. He attacked Xiao with his fists, because it was obvious that he was involved. But no one dared to go any further. If he could knock out Tujinya, he could definitely knock them out too. They took the brother away, but said the case wasn't over and they would definitely come back again. Yan couldn't believe that Xiao was capable of such a thing, that he was able to knock out his opponent. Xiao replied that he had asked for it. He wanted to get into his mind, which he couldn't allow. Then he found out that these guys have been bullying Yan for about 4 years now. They appeared as soon as the girl's father died, and despite the fact that they constantly intimidated them, the sisters didn't want to sell the house they grew up in. 2 years ago, Yan joined the Steelcutters team. The captain threatened them, and they haven't reported in since, but came with demands to sell the house again as soon as they learned of the captain's condition. Xiu was surprised to learn that the government didn't help in this case. After all, he was the one who had promoted this policy in his previous life. But it was more profitable for the state to be on the side of the revenue generators like Kaixiang rather than fighting on the side of the weak. Xiao decided he should help in some way, for the girl had treated him well and offered him a night's lodging. During the conversation, Xiao said to join other teams to sweep the secret areas. Yan also decided to look for a new team if her captain didn't wake up, though she really didn't want to. After all, even within teams there is often deceit, betrayal, and murder, despite the laws created by Musk. She added that if she found a good team, she would recommend Xiao to them. The boy agreed. Suddenly, Xiao received a new assignment, to clear the secret area alone. It had to be completed within 12 hours. Without slowing down, he poisoned himself to fulfill it, for it was a good opportunity to get bonuses. Thanks to the portal built into the system, he was able to go straight to the realm. This time, it looked like medieval Europe. As he did, he also saw sculptures that reminded him of gargoyles. In their normal state, these monsters resembled sculptures, but as soon as a living organism appeared nearby, they came to life. Xiao thought that they could cause no small amount of trouble with their sturdy body and sharp fangs. If the Yan squad were to encounter such a demon, they would suffer heavy losses. After only a couple seconds, the gargoyles sensed Xiao's presence, came to life, and pounced on him. But unfortunately for the gargoyles, Xiao came to them. A monster that could handle them without much difficulty. He destroyed those monsters in a couple moves and waited to see what would happen next. His instincts did not fail him. In a few minutes, he was surrounded by dozens of gargoyles. But this was just another amusement for him. He told the gargoyles to attack all at once. Dozens more monsters hovered above him in the air. They were preparing to attack. But Xiao didn't hesitate and attacked first. He killed the monsters one by one. He was thrashing heads and tearing their bodies apart at an insane speed. Xiao clipped their wings. And although gargoyles are not inherently afraid, and this time, they were greatly afraid, suddenly he saw movement behind him. He realized that someone else had joined the battle. It was the leader of the gargoyles who possessed a level 4. He was a monster, yet he looked like a human. Without slowing down, they rushed at each other with incredible speed. Suddenly there were human voices. They were footsteps, which made it clear that someone was about to come in. This secret realm was entered by a team hoping to snag a nice reward. But they had not expected to see such a thing. for this realm had appeared less than 12 hours ago. Even though they were promised that this place was sealed, it was obvious that someone very powerful had already been here. All of the gargoyles were torn apart with their bare hands with extreme brutality. At first, they couldn't believe how someone could do something like that in such a short time. But after they saw the main gargoyle dead, all doubts fell away. After returning from the secret mission, Xiao and Yan went about their business, and the sister was left alone at home. Suddenly, she heard a knock on the door. At first, she thought it was a guest who had recently moved in, and she was very frightened when she found out that they were representatives of the Kaijiang company. Suddenly, unknown guys kicked in the door and broke inside the house. The guy came even closer and said he knew there was someone in the house. The girl was ready to stand up for herself. It made him laugh that the girl was going to fight back with a child's wooden sword. He called her defective. The girl swung to hit him, but she didn't keep her balance and fell. The company representative came closer, and stepping on the wooden sword continued to taunt the girl. He ordered a search of the entire DM, and to find the guy who dared to lay a hand on one of their squad. Having scattered everything, the strangers reported to the commander that there was no one else in the house. In that case, as a trophy, they decided to take Sister Yan with them. But then they realized it was a big crime and a case like this could raise a huge fuss. The commander then instructed one of his subordinates to enter the house by car when Xiao and Yan returned home, and they decided to fill the car with garbage from all over the neighborhood and make it look like an accident. Upon receiving the order, everyone immediately set about carrying it out. Soon it started to rain in the city, and Xiao and Yan hurried home to avoid getting wet. Suddenly the girl saw that her sister was lying motionless on the floor. She was very frightened. She was very angry and got very wet in the rain. Yan immediately rushed to her sister's aid. She wanted to know what had happened during their absence. Qianliu said that people from the Kaijiang company came. Yan asked Xiao to take her sister into the house, while she stayed behind to pack up the courtyard. Suddenly, there was a loud rumble. Turning around, they saw a pile of garbage that was dumping right into their yard from a huge car. Inside the car sat the driver, who smiled cheekily and said it all happened by accident. At the end, he added that this is the first gift from Kaijiang company for them. Qianliu was tearing towards her sister, but Xiao stopped her, telling her that it would only make things worse. And then Yan, angry, wet, and dirty, went into the house without saying a word. Qianliu and her boyfriend stayed on the street. The girl didn't understand why things were happening to them like this. Why is there no justice in the world? And Xiao replied that he had never met it either. He added that the world is unjust in itself, so justice is not worth seeking. He wasn't interested in their problems, but they came to him on their own. And now it's his headache. In order to move on, he decided he had an obligation to deal with them. Qianliu tried to stop him, for going there in her opinion would mean death for him. Rumor has it the thugs in that company were level 3 and 4, and the head of the company was level 5. She said that the sister's problems were really boring to him, but he always liked to get rid of boredom and kill problems. The guy went to the investment company of those guys. Levin on the street got even bigger. He walked inside with a sword in his hands. Everyone looked at him with a surprised look. It was immediately clear that he had come to scandalize, and the guys in suits asked Xiao to put his weapon away. But Xiao didn't listen to them. He was determined to fix the problem and chopped those guys into small pieces in a couple of seconds. Along the way, he murdered in cold blood anyone who tried to stop him. There were more and more opponents, but he killed them without much effort. Xiao headed for the office on the top floor. It was there that the heads of the company were just discussing how to take the land away from the sisters. Suddenly, a frightened employee burst in and informed them that a killer was in the building. They were frightened at how one man had managed to cause a whole massacre. Employees never touch powerful professionals or people in power, so they decided to see who was out there. They realized that the killer was close by when they saw him deal with one of the employees right in the stairwell. They were surprised to see that this was the guy they had seen at Yan and her sister's house. And then they figured they could handle him in a couple minutes since they were all level 4 professionals. Xiao realized that it would be difficult for him to maintain his human appearance during the battle, since the opponents possessed a level 4. Xiao turned off the lights in the entire building so that they wouldn't immediately realize what was going on. But even this did not frighten the heads of the corporation, for one of them possessed the ability to see at night as well as during the day. But his confidence abruptly vanished when he saw in front of him not an ordinary man, but a horrible monster. He pointed his weapon forward and prepared to attack, but he saw no one else in front of him. After only a second, there was an unidentifiable sound and the smell of blood in the building. No one knew if Joseph was dead or just wounded. It wasn't long before the monster reached the others. Despite their abilities and confidence, they could not stand up to the enemy. To distract him in some way, one of the company used his ice arrow art, but that didn't help either. The monster repulsed the attack very easily and deftly. Then he decided to go ahead and finish off the one who was bothering the sisters the most. He slit his throat. Xiao didn't have an ounce of sympathy for his opponents, and after chopping off this guy's head, he decided to deal with the last one. Professionals with lesser levels were scared and didn't know whether to attack the monster or whether it was better to retreat. But Xiao made the decision for them, killing everyone without a second thought instantly. Suddenly, he saw a stranger in front of him who told him in an orderly tone to stop. He was emanating an energy that was unfamiliar to Xiao. He assumed that he was a 6th-level master, but he never could figure out if he was a monster or a professional with an altered system. The stranger told Xiao that he was a very interesting specimen, and that he could get a good amount of money for it on the black market. He added that the bigwigs who are behind him will be very upset about today, so he is obliged to destroy whoever has harmed the company. The stranger decided to attack Xiao in the head, but this attack was very simple for him, and he easily dodged it. As it turned out, he did so in order to find out the monster's power level and strategize for battle. Soon he made a host of heavier attacks, but they too failed to bring him the desired result. And then the stranger decided to use his signature move, which always brought him victory in battles. He was sure he would blow half of the monster's head off. That fact made her a little upset. He wanted to get the monster alive, but even for a dead monster of this species, he hoped to get no small reward. He pulled off his signature trick, which gave him the opportunity to get in close to the monster. Pointing his gun directly at his head, he fired. Mentally, he considered himself a winner. He saw the flames from the shot engulf his opponent's entire head. It seemed he had no chance at all. But what was his surprise when all the smoke cleared, and he saw that there wasn't a scratch on the monster. The stranger was shocked, and didn't understand how this was possible. The stranger was shocked, and understood how it was possible. Then he realized that the monster knew this technique. It was true since it was invented by Xiao himself. Its name was 19th Rapier. Xiao thought that honing this technique to such skill was a feat. The stranger laughed, since this technique had been invented by Musk. By the way, it could only be used in the name of justice. Then he ordered the monster to get out the good way. He thought that someone who stood in the way of development was being unfair. That is why such a creature deserves to die. He realized that the monster would not leave and still attacked him. This was his mistake. Xiao was already prepared for such a development. He used a surprise attack and pinned his opponent to the wall. Then he decided to introduce himself. His new name was Blood Fairy Y, in honor of a sword that, like him, is without boundary potential. Holding that sword in his hands, it was as if he could feel his heartbeat. That's how the demon knew they were perfect for each other. Rumors of what was going on at the corporation spread throughout the city. Special agencies arrived at the scene. They were ready to storm the building and were waiting for the order. Although everything was under control, Commander Jong was in no hurry to attack. For starters, he wanted to try to get the attacker to surrender and find out what was really going on in the building. Innocent people could have died. Suddenly, they saw someone come out. It was Xiao, blood dripping from his clothes. At this moment, Yan found out that Xiao had gone to Kaiskiang's company. She immediately went to him. She was surprised to see the city army arriving at the company's address. One of the army immediately stopped the girl after recognizing that she was Yan Changchang and asked if she knew Xiao. The girl was very frightened that something had happened to him. Most of all, she was afraid that he had died, but the man from the army said he was fine, which is suspicious, considering the place he's been. Right from the scene, Xiaoqiu was taken to the Defense Force's special prison. The commander wanted to know what had happened in the company, but the guy wouldn't make contact. He also didn't give his name or where he was from. The captain was very annoyed by this. The only thing is, he admitted that the assault and murder of the company employees was his doing. But unfortunately, he didn't have any ID on him. He's like a ghost who escaped government surveillance. It's also known that he's related to Yan Changchang, who is also being sought by the people from the Secret Area Inspection Bureau. The paperwork states that the girl is a level 2 professional and her father was a level 5 professional. He served in the army, then retired and didn't want to serve as an administrative official. He died in a battle with a great demon. Yang Qianlu's sister was also seriously injured in this battle. It is known that Xiao went to the corporation to stand up for his sisters. The report was suddenly interrupted by a man who came through the door without knocking. It was Arthur, the head of the department. He suggested that they go to Sao's room and find out what the matter was firsthand. They immediately went to the guy's place. Commander Jong was a 7th level professional, and Manager Arthur was a 6th level professional. The commander noticed Shio looking at his cloak with a sense of nostalgia. He was very interested in this fact. He said that Xiao Qiu should have already guessed what kind of ending awaited him based on the severity of his crime. He'll either be sentenced to death or sent to the front lines of a high-threat environment for redemption. He realized that no one comes back from the front line anyway. Some die in the first battle. Others have to fight at least hundreds of battles to come back. But for Xiao, the road to the front lines was not a punishment, but an opportunity to purify his soul. He added that he had been on the front lines once before, but not as a soldier fighting monsters. He had a slightly different role. The commander realized that there were not many qualified professionals returning from the front at all. Arthur said he's been on the front line for over a decade, and only Musk can be more qualified than him. Commander Jong showed the Order of the Mask, and added that he had fought under his leadership before, and they were a long way from him. They were far behind him, staring at his back. Arthur said in a gruff tone that the current peace situation was very difficult, especially after the Musk incident. So if someone finds out that they are being tricked into entering dungeons, it will be a shock to the public, and even cost the lives of many professionals. So they threatened Xiao to keep quiet about it, or else they would send Ego to the federal capital where he would be treated much worse. Hearing this, Xiao thought that he realistically wanted to go there. But for now, it was not very likely. In his past life, Musk had to face the Great Demon, a monster of elemental level. After the revival, the demon began to exterminate all of Dahe. At that time, Xiao had only been sent to the front lines after the trial. The Musk managed to destroy it in one blow. And although the monster didn't manage to do much damage, society criticized him heavily. Because of the wave of condemnations, he was condemned again, and was forced to publicly apologize. But in this life, there's no hero named Musk, only a guy named Xiao Q. And he had nothing to do with those deaths in Dahe. Arthur wondered if the commander was being so nice to the guy. He'd been to the front lines before. The latter replied that he had never seen anyone of such age, and with such fierce strength on the front lines. It was obvious that he was no ordinary professional. He clearly had a talent for cutting off the heads of level 6 professionals, but he must be judged by the people of the Federation. Arthur agreed with that. A little later, there was a meeting in the capital of the federal government, the Star City. Xiao Qiu's case was under consideration. Here, he was considered a savage criminal who had brutally killed dozens of people. The parliament president didn't understand how such a young guy was able to kill level 6 professionals. Though some congressmen agreed that he was a talent, still the Federation had no need for such personalities. Some congressmen were eager for a harsh public punishment for him, since Kaijiang was their shady source of income. But the president didn't want to devote much time to this guy's case, and ordered Xiao to be sent to the front. He was more interested in information about Musk. He was angry that no one could find out anything about him. A man couldn't go missing like that without a trace. He realized that Max was probably hiding somewhere, and maybe even close. While reviewing Xiao's case, he ordered his subordinates to search for the Mask more diligently. They shouldn't expect him to show up on his own. What pissed off the chairman was that others thought that by abandoning the force, Musk posed no threat. But they replied that there are fewer and fewer people supporting Musk, and even if he decides to attack, no one will side with him. The only thing that reassured the chairman was that he had the most power at the moment. No one could stand before him. But to actually kick Musk out, he gave away a lot of power and money to other council members. The Mask simply had to be found and brought under control for the good of everyone. The next question was about monsters. The number of their attacks had increased by 32% since the creation of the Federation. Turns out the defense couldn't last a month without Musk. Without him, they're useless. Everyone was shocked. This could have had a big impact on their credibility in the community. Some on the board even thought they may have been pushing Musk hard. The chairman didn't like that anyone might question the decision to banish a hero. It was shocking to him that the Federation was so lacking in self-belief and couldn't manage without Musk. He ordered the mobilization of the army's elite and sent them to vulnerable places. Not everyone liked the decision, but the chairman gave a clear instruction to fulfill the ego. In addition, he ordered the criminal Xiao to be brought to Star City as an example, so that others wouldn't be made an example of. Meanwhile, in Dahe, the defense forces released Yan Changchang and her sister. After checking everything, they found no reason to detain them and said they would subpoena them as witnesses. Xiao Qiu committed a terrible crime by killing dozens of people. He must be punished. Sister Yan disagreed with these words. They didn't consider killing horrible, dishonest people a crime. The commander intervened in the conversation. He agreed with the girl and considered everyone from the corporation a criminal and a murderer. He added that these people have really done a lot of evil to a large number of people. A member of the defense forces did not expect to hear such a thing. But even if they deserved to die, they should have been tried first. No one has the right to take a vigilante justice. The girl was greatly indignant. She wondered why, knowing all this, no one had judged them. Yan just watched everything. She'd experienced so many unfair moments that she could no longer resist like her sister. Qianliu no longer wanted to continue the conversation with the commander. She asked her sister to go home. The commander said that it was fine if Qianliu could walk again. The subordinate was very curious as to why he felt that way. He replied that the girl had tremendous inner strength. If she walked, she would surely reach a high level. He was even a little jealous of her and wished he'd had that kind of strength when he was younger. Back home, Yan left her sister to rest and went to clean up the yard herself. She promised that she would definitely think of something about Xiaoqiu. Qinglu then decided that if there were places in the world where the sun couldn't reach, she herself would begin to illuminate them. She put all her strength into those words, and suddenly, even for herself, the girl was able to get to her feet. Yan quickly got through cleaning outside and decided to move on to cleaning the house. She couldn't believe her eyes when she entered her sister's room. Qianlu was on her feet. Suddenly something began to happen to the girl. She turned into an incomprehensible creature and ordered her sister to run away. Meanwhile, in the defense meeting room, something unsettling to everyone was happening. The commander felt the aura of the great demon. Everyone couldn't believe it. After all, the great demon had long ago been destroyed by Musk. But the commander has ordered the activation of the emergency plan. He added that it is urgent to evacuate the entire population of Dahe. He takes responsibility for everything. Meanwhile, the town lived an ordinary life, unsuspecting. The young lad decided to enjoy the fragrance of the rose, which pleased the eyes of those passing by. At one point, the buds began to bloom at an incredible rate. It was even a little alarming. A small bee flew to the fragrance, and suddenly, touching the flower, its legs began to grow petals. It took a couple minutes for passers-by to notice that the same thing started happening to the guy who was admiring the flowers. With horror, everyone around them began to scatter. It was clear that this was the work of an unknown monster. If only a small petal was touched, all living things were immediately captured by it. Several professionals who were nearby immediately responded to the situation. The people of Dahi rejoiced and already thought they were saved. But the joy was hasty. Any professional techniques were useless. The infection had the same effect on them. The commander and his subordinates were already approaching the scene. He wondered why this time the demon didn't kill everyone at once, but turned them into flowers. He nicknamed it the Flower Demon. He gave orders to take the demon under surveillance and not allow it to spread. One had to be extremely careful not to get infected. Anyone who came in contact with the monster was highly contagious. Meanwhile, the green pollen from the monster's spores spread through Dahi even faster. They were devouring people, and no one could yet figure out how to escape it. The commander was determined to use his ability against the monster. He ordered everyone to lie down on the ground. He gathered his power and unleashed a firepower that was able to cover several neighborhoods. But even that was useless. The great demon's aura continued to affect people even in the form of flower ashes. It was clear, if the demon was not stopped, it would devour the entire city of Dahi in a matter of hours. The whole city resembled a strange greenhouse. All the houses were covered with vines, and the people were transformed into strange flower creatures. Seeing this, Arthur was horrified. Dahi was now a green hell. The commander ordered the fire spells to cease, and not to attack those infected by the fire. We had to concentrate on keeping the contaminated ash out of the area. It was too dangerous. It was a demon that was able to be reborn. There are demons that can be reborn from even small pieces. He is like a jellyfish that, having reached puberty, reverts to its more youthful version. Then the growth phase begins again, and so it goes on indefinitely. That is, this demon is immortal. But this catastrophe is even more terrible because the demon does not just kill, but creates its own kind, respectively, even faster spreads the infection. Arthur admitted that after destroying the first great demon, Musk gave orders to cure all the infected so that it could not recover. The officials agreed. But as soon as Musk left, they forgot about the order and embezzled the money he had allocated for the treatment. The commander was angry, but decided they would deal with that later. Now they needed to find out exactly where the demon was. Arthur realized that the commander was about to go off to fight the great demon. Now is a good time, as he has just been reborn, and has not yet gained full strength. If it's not destroyed now, there will be a heavy price to pay later. Arthur said he would ask the monitoring bureau to send a map of the energy fluctuations. There was breaking news on every screen in the city. For security reasons, it was decided to deploy part of the city's defense to the front line. But that wasn't all. Rather, all citizens heard the breaking news. A natural disaster monster is suspected to have appeared in Dahi City. Local authorities are still coordinating their actions. Meanwhile, the great demon had managed to infect more territories. There were discussions on social media. Many people were indignant about where Musk had disappeared. Wasn't he supposed to deal with such situations? According to the information, the level of monsters caused by the natural disaster is low. The commander of Daehi City took control of everything. All the hot news was transmitted urgently on live TV. Commander Jong definitely deserved the title of a level 7 professional. The monsters couldn't even manage to catch up to him. Virtually the entire country watched his actions live. Suddenly he was. Everyone thought he'd found something, maybe the location of a great demon. Indeed, right in front of him was someone with a strong aura emanating from him. The commander looked closer and saw the girl. He seemed to recognize her. It was Qian Lu. He was emanating a huge magical power. The commander was not afraid of it. He turned to the girl and said that he had seen many like her who pretended to be a god. Some monsters specifically imitated religious imagery, so that they would be worshipped by humans. Arthur confirmed that judging from the energy fluctuations, it was the reborn monster. You shouldn't trust an attractive image, but Zhao already knew that. He didn't expect the girl he had seen just a few hours ago to become such a monster. She turned to the commander and asked if he regretted it. Ego's answer was clear without words. He began to use his skills and was determined to destroy the monster. The immense power filled almost the entire space with itself. He wished he'd killed the girl when she was still in the stroller. The commander directed all his power along with his rage at the great demon. The whole world watched live and was shocked by what they saw. Zhao once again confirmed his skill as the monster didn't even have time to react. It was obvious he'd had half his head blown off, but the commander doubted it would be easy. And so it was. In just a moment, his body began to recover at a tremendous speed. The girl laughed at this reception. She felt like she had just been tickled. The whole world could not tear itself away from the screens and waited for what would happen next. Everyone watched as the monster recovered, and it was even a bit enchanting. She regained her former appearance as if that strong attack from the commander had never happened. He also watched in amazement at how quickly she was regenerating. Seeing this, it wasn't hard to conclude that the girl wasn't an ordinary monster. But the commander didn't give up. He decided to test the demon's strength once more. This time he channeled even more power as far as he could. He was able to do more damage, taking the demon's body as well as its head. But he was once again able to regenerate at the same speed. It seemed that nothing could harm him. She told the commander that his light-dispelling darkness was very weak for someone like her. He himself was shocked at how strong his opponent was. Suddenly he felt a great danger. He realized it was time to run away. But to a demon he seemed pathetic. He wondered if that was Zhao's entire speed as well. She laughed and said it was silly to try to stop her with so much power. Toei decided to teach him a lesson, and in an instant the commander was already consumed by her power. The people of Dahi didn't understand how this was possible. He was one of those who had hope. Then Zhao realized that the monster's advantage was that it moved with the help of plants. Arthur ordered him to retreat before it was too late. The demon cannot be killed while the humanoid flowers are still alive. Weapons of mass destruction will have to be used to destroy the infestation. But the commander replied that he could not escape from there. He was surrounded. He was almost in a critical situation and was preparing for his last fight. In Zhao's mind, of course, he had a plan. He couldn't just give up. He removed his cloak, taking his reward for the battle he had fought alongside Musk, and prepared to do something the great demon clearly didn't like. The girl assumed that the commander was giving up, for he had no other choice. To her, he seemed like a cornered animal waiting to be killed. But the commander used forcing his element. It was his way of dying honorably. It is known that elemental professionals cannot fully level the effects of the element, so using elemental boosting results in death. But Arthur knew that it was a complete release of life force, the burning of which raises the level. The demon knew about it too. With the release of such power, the 7th level could be compared to the 8th level. After such an admission, professionals turn into ordinary people who can get sick, and some are even completely paralyzed. The commander once again tried attacking the demon with renewed vigor. She thought it was useless because of her ability to move her mind, but suddenly the commander's kick was faster than her movement speed. The contagion still continued to spread, but the lightning bolts were handling the infection for now. Jiao was gripped by the sensation of every piece of skin being destroyed and then rebuilt. An endless cycle of pain. Everyone was happy that the commander had managed to wound an elemental-level monster. But Arthur knew it didn't kill the monster. That was evidenced by the energy fluctuations, which were only getting higher. Then he realized that this was not a great demon, as they had previously thought. No one understood who they were talking about, for it seemed no one was more frightening than the great demon. Arthur replied that it was about the giant Antaeus. According to legend, he cannot be defeated as long as he stands on the earth and feeds its power. The tens of thousands of infected in Dahi are its sources of power. If you don't destroy them all, the demon can't be defeated. He is one, and yet there are thousands of them. Everyone could see that the energy index was increasing at a tremendous rate. It confirmed what Arthur had said. He reached the maximum fluctuation level of the red secret area. It had now become a level 9 natural disaster, and its power continued to grow. Everyone in the Defense Department understood that Dahe was probably beyond saving. The girl was surprised that human professionals were able to reach such a stage by burning themselves. Once upon a time, she too had fantasized about becoming big and strong, and going to travel the world with a sword. She asked why it was that a commander with such power couldn't cut through the darkness he spoke of so much. Why would he let so many innocent people in Dahe die? The defense forces could no longer contain the spread of infection. The flower mutants were multiplying very quickly and had already practically broken through the defense shield. But suddenly the soldiers saw that the monsters started to retreat. They could not believe that they had managed to escape. But then it became clear that this was not the end. Something more terrible was coming at them. Plants from all over the city began to crawl into one place, creating a huge mountain. Suddenly there was a massive explosion that could be seen from every corner of Dah. Thus, the demon not only regenerated, but also grew in size several times over. Compared to him, the commander seemed like a small bug. According to him, everyone in this world is used to death, and it is impossible to save everyone. He tried once more to confront the demon, though he realized it was already useless. The girl easily contained the strength that Jiao considered to be the ultimate in strength. But the people of Dahe did not yet fully understand this. They believed that the commander could defeat the enemy. They were proud of their commander and even dreamed of becoming a professional like him. But the girl didn't want to waste any more energy or time on a fight in which she was the clear winner. She clutched him tightly in her fist and said she was going to hell, along with this lousy world. She clenched her fist all the way and crushed Jiao. He turned into flower petals that were scattered by the wind. But this death was honorable, and to everyone he remained a hero. Watching everything, Arthur reported angrily that the commander's energy was gone. No one in Dahe was prepared for something like this. The hope of salvation died before their eyes. The residents were counting on the fact that help would arrive very soon, or they would all be finished. They even remembered the mask, but the hero hasn't appeared anywhere for over a month. People were desperate. No one seemed to be able to help them except the mask. Everyone was actively discussing what had happened in the networks. Many people realized that it was pointless to expect help. The government had abandoned them. Meanwhile, Xiao is imprisoned and learns of what is happening in Dahe. The alert instructed everyone to head to the evacuation sites. Xiao realized it was his time to act. The chairman was frantic. An hour and a half was allotted for evacuation, during which time Dahe would be wiped off the face of the earth. Everyone sat back. They realized that they were all afraid to go out against this demon after what they had seen. Somebody all risked a rebuke to the chairman that he shouldn't have treated Musk that way. He didn't expect it to be brought up again, but he realized that Musk would definitely come in handy right now. He didn't hold back and slammed his fist on the table and said that everyone should give back to the community. Then there was an opinion from the crowd to use nuclear weapons against the demon. Everyone was in favor of the idea. If we use small arms, we could save some of the population. The chairman only needed permission to raze the city to the ground. He would be hailed as a savior. Still, he realized that not a small number of lives would have to be sacrificed to do so. Suddenly there was an urgent message. There was someone else on the scene. The chairman suggested that it was the professionals they had sent had already arrived. But everyone was horrified to learn that it was another unfamiliar monster. Meanwhile, there was another incident at the special prison of the defense forces. The guards ran to the prisoner's cell at the loud sound, but no one was there. Instead, they found clear signs that could only belong to a creature with immense magical power. The defense forces were in a panic. Their commander had died, and the plants continued to advance. No one wanted to die, so everyone rushed to flee the scene. The few who had the courage left to fight were killed instantly. They tried to help each other, knowing they were already doomed. The plants either infected them and turned them into their own kind, or tore them to pieces. Curious reporters kept broadcasting everything despite orders from management to get away from the dangerous site. They managed to film the great might that was moving straight towards the monster, destroying all the plants in its path. People were watching this, assuming it was a Federation backup. They hadn't yet seen who it might be, but they already considered their new hero. Shou rushed over to destroy this monster and obtain the great demon core reward. He could sense that this demon's aura was very different from the one he had to kill in his previous life. This demon personified a life that resembled a primordial world of eternal tranquility, but it was still an absolute evil that he was determined to kill. In the meantime, the girl continued to turn everything into a single biome. It was painful for her to live in this rotten world. She encouraged everyone to join her world, where there is no pain and injustice. The girl felt she was no longer herself. She had merged with the colors. All the lives it had consumed were now united, and only the joy of life remained in their heads. She rejoiced that more lives would soon join the family of the new land. Suddenly, she felt that a large group of plants in the south had disappeared. She realized that someone had interfered with her plan and was eager to find out who. At that moment, the girl saw a demon that was heading towards her. Xiu was surprised to see Qian Lu. He would never have thought that she would be a demon. The girl wondered why the demon wasn't affected by her assimilation. She realized that he was a danger to her, for assimilation worked even on monsters. Then the question became who he was. Xiao quickly managed to get through all the flower mutants in one piece. Everyone watching was delighted at how fast and agile he moved. The monster didn't even have anything to counter it. Just from what they saw, the adrenaline levels of the people of Dahe were rising. Everyone wondered if monsters could fight like that. It was probably a hidden professional. The reason people are able to fight is because of wisdom and ability. The ingenuity of this monster is uncharacteristic of even a level 9 pro. It's supposed to be a human, but his armor is rather odd. It's hard to imagine what would happen if one day monsters surpassed humans. In the end, Xiao reached the great demon right at the back of his mind. The girl didn't expect it at all, and just waited to see what would happen next. Everyone was still waiting just the same. It seemed the actions of the monster who wanted to confront the great demon were not logical. But to pull off such a stunt, you had to have tremendous self-confidence. Xiao didn't hesitate and immediately attacked the flower monster. The attack was quite successful. He hit her right in the head. Everyone continued to watch what was happening without leaving the screens. At the same moment, all the humanoid flowers stopped moving altogether. Everyone was insanely happy. Did the monster manage to defeat the natural disaster? The girl turned to her opponent. She wondered who he was. But she was even more interested in where he got the Bloodstorm blade from. She assumed he was a monster too, and then said they didn't need to fight, because together they can change this rotten world. She offered him a reward for completing the mission for nothing. The core of a great demon. Only those who were recognized by him could use it. Xiao found this offer quite tempting, but he didn't know what to do yet. She kept suggesting to join, to get rid of the past life and live a new peaceful life. In the new world, he will be able to enjoy all the beauty of the Earth's nature. If there is darkness in the world that cannot be dispelled, then together it can be destroyed. Suddenly, the scream of 1,000 humanoid flowers rang out, striking people right in the heart. It was hard to endure. But what bothered everyone the most was, these demons most likely know each other. Xiao was confused. He was also disappointed in humanity, and understood the girl perfectly. But he remembered that his main goal was to destroy all the monsters. The girl guessed it, and offered to see who would win in the end. Her head felt as if it had exploded, and a huge amount of poisonous pollen began to emanate from it. Sile had to fly as far away from her as possible to avoid getting hurt. The huge vine that wriggled from the great demon's neck reached out towards Xiao. It enveloped him tightly and prevented him from making even the slightest movement. It seemed like he was in a trap that would be hard to get out of. Her scream was another torture that was even harder to endure. But Xiao was the kind of person who wouldn't just give up. Then he decided to fold the wings of the gargoyle first, and afterwards to spread them sharply and thus break the vine that shackled him. One had to quickly take advantage of the moment when the demon was with its mouth open. Xiao rushed inside. He had fought huge monsters many times, so he knew what to do. In a second, it had traveled through her body and out the backside, through the back of her head. The reason he couldn't kill her is because he didn't find her real body. When Xiao made sure it wasn't in his head, he realized exactly where it was. Time after time, he began to strike at the flower monster's torso area. From each wound, a vine instantly grew out of the wound and tried to patch up the body. Xiao was sure that the ego strategy would work, so he didn't stop for a second. When he completely disemboweled the great demon's body, he saw a bright light. The girl's body was right there. With all his strength, he rushed toward her. This was his chance to take the girl by surprise. Unsuspecting, she continued to focus on assimilation. He swung his sword at her from behind and stabbed her in the back. It was a fatal blow. She didn't expect anyone else to have the courage to stand in her way. Due to the complicated maneuvers, Xiao had almost run out of energy and began to lose his demonic appearance. He would have fallen down long ago if he hadn't been supported by a flower vine. Ego's life was actually in Chen Lu's hands as well. She wondered what to do with it. Suddenly, she was able to partially make out the human features of her opponent. She looked closely and said she was even more attractive than the hero Musk. The girl said there's no reason to worry. She's dead, and only uses her remaining energy to keep in shape. In just a couple of minutes, the sun disappeared and dark clouds gathered over the city. A terrible downpour began to fall. No one understood what the rain meant. the victory or defeat of the great demon. In the distance, a bright glow appeared from behind the clouds and was rapidly approaching. It wasn't long before the population realized that a nuclear bomb was coming right at them. As it turned out, the chairman did bow to pressure and authorized the launch of nuclear weapons. He realized that the entire responsibility rested on his shoulders alone and felt guilty. After seeing the bomb, the girl said that the government is really ruthless. It treats as a bargaining chip even the people of Days City. But she was glad she got the chance to show what kind of people sit in the government that mocked Musk. After saying those words, she left Zhao and went to fulfill her last mission. With her last strength, she began to revive her body. It grew stronger and bigger. She summoned all the flower humanoids, with whom she fused into a single being as a result. More of her subordinates were arriving by the second, and she was getting bigger. Her hands smoothly transformed into branches, and as a result, she completely personified a lush tree. The nuclear missile was getting closer, and very soon it was going to reach its target. But the whole blow was taken by this tree, which was able to completely cover the city. There was a massive explosion that blinded the entire surface with its light. Nuclear fire destroyed everything in its path. The humanoid flowers humbly accepted their doom. The flower demon lost all of his strength. His vine unraveled, and Zhao began to fall to the ground. He watched everything and couldn't believe where the girl got so much courage and bravery to give her life for others. The blast wave was so strong that the scale it encompassed is hard to imagine. The barrier shield could barely contain that wave. Outside, people watched the matting die, and when the shield was breached, only remnants of the fiery flames that could no longer do much damage went to the population. Everyone looked up hoping that it was over and they could survive this nuclear blast. High above stood a huge cloud of smoke and dust, and it was not yet clear whether the great demon had actually died. A huge portion of the tree was destroyed and was blazing with heavy fire. Arthur was informed that the object that was causing the incredible energy fluctuations had disappeared. He couldn't believe that the natural disaster had been successfully dealt with. Arthur was overwhelmed with emotion. In a voice, he turned to the dead Jiao, saying that Dahi was saved. His death had not been in vain. All that remains as a reminder of his exploits is his cloak. Surprisingly, he remained unharmed. 2 awards were splayed out on him as a reminder of what kind of man he was. People didn't realize if a natural disaster had collided with nuclear weapons on purpose. Suddenly, the smoke dispersed, and it became apparent that the tree had split in 2 and was beginning to disintegrate into pieces. It turned into flower petals that spread all over the city. For the residents, the sight seemed incredibly beautiful and symbolic. Many people specifically came out of their hiding places to enjoy such beauty. But the petals were no longer infected and posed no threat. Now they were just ordinary flower petals that everyone looked at with admiration. While everyone was distracted by this, Xiao was sitting behind one of the stones, holding Qianlu in his arms. Even though she was a monster and had caused a lot of damage, he had a lot of respect for her. She reached upward, enjoying the streams of warm wind that blew the flower petals around. At last the girl said that she had never seen such a beautiful spring. She died, leaving behind a beautiful glow. Xiao received a reward for completing the mission. He now held the core of a great demon in his hands, but realized that it was also Qianlu's heart. His powers were at their limit. He equipped himself with the core of a great demon and disappeared. The city of Dahe was saved. People watching the live broadcast were incredibly relieved and happy. Also, something incredible happened. The humanoid flowers turned back into humans. Everyone who watched this was so shocked they couldn't say a word. But it also meant that the flowers killed by the bomb were human. Strong condemnations of the government began online. But soon, all correspondence and files were deleted, as if it had never happened. Though the government was in control, but getting rid of the root of the problem was not so easy. The population was waiting for an official comment on what happened. People brought up the subject of Musk again. A lot of people wanted to take the president's place. But the deaths of 1,000 people were not enough to remove him from office. Despite the fact that all present expressed consent for the use of the weapon, the government decided to shift the blame to Musk. But not everyone understood how this applied to Musk if he disappeared over a month ago. He replied that it was because the hero wasn't there that the government had to use guns. He's responsible for the deaths of those people. The Federation gave Musk so much, and he abandoned the people of Dahe in their hour of need. He added that if you think about it logically, Musk is the one responsible for the appearance of the natural disaster. Some chairmen were in a stupor from what they heard, but it was really to their advantage. Left to himself, he assured the president that there was no reason to worry and promised to take care of even the smallest details. The chairman was that his power didn't have as much firepower as Musk's. He wasn't verbose, but inquired how the preparation for the Rise plan was going. He replied that the experiment was even ahead of its plan. Many of the specimens are capable of living much longer without even taking on human form. There's still a lack of data right now, but human-monster fusion is definitely possible. The president wanted to be the one to elevate the human species to unprecedented heights, but the aide replied that it's even more than they realize. If they give people great power, they will become gods to mankind. Before Musk led the army behind him, there was no trace of man on the front lines, only monsters that came out of secret areas. It was also called the Cradle of Despair. It was impossible to live there because of the constant monster attacks. But not until Musk showed up, from a tiny hope of survival to unstoppable progress. All of this was made possible by one man. The subordinates were already waiting for Captain Jean. They had some terrible news to deliver to her. The men argued amongst themselves, choosing which one of them would tell her this. They looked at the portal. There was a whine that the captain was about to appear. This girl was unusually strong. Her last opponent was a level 7 demon. She managed to clear the area in only half an hour, even though it was at the same level. That's why it's no wonder Captain Zhang Ling is called a genius. She was Commander Zhang's daughter, and she was such a good professional. Back from the mission, Captain Zhang didn't understand why the guys were greeting her with such faces. One of them hesitantly replied that bad news had come. He reported that a disaster demon had appeared in Dehi City, and her father, Commander Jiang, sacrificed himself to save the people of the city. But Lin didn't react in any way, and ordered the team to advance to the next area. Everyone knew she had a steely temper, but no one expected an indifferent reaction to such a degree. They looked at each other, and without asking any more questions, silently went after the captain. The boys knew her character. Even though she controlled lightning, they called her Cold Heart. They even made up a poem about her. The girl heard what they were doing and reprimanded them and said she might move them to a reform camp if they didn't stop. On the front line, secret areas are forming at an incredible rate. It is only thanks to Captain Zhang's command that their mopping up is done as quickly as possible. It had been a long time since the captain had set out to mop up the area alone, but this time her team offered to help. They were also already tired of idling and jokingly started calling themselves Captain Zhang's support group. But she turned around and asked if that meant he had such a low opinion of his captain. Frightened, the boy started to retort and realized he'd said too much. Captain Zhang silently went to the secret area alone, and the guys were left waiting for her return as before. It wasn't until the girl went into the portal that everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Her aura was truly frightening to the team. It resembled the aura of a demon. Only someone with strong willpower would be able to cope with such difficulties at such a young age. In ancient times, it was called the Tao, and according to the team, she would be the most insensitive monster. Upon arriving at the dungeon, the girl went looking for demons to mop up, but there was only a horrible stench. Looking around, she saw a large number of monsters that had clearly been killed long ago. With surprise, she wondered if someone had beaten her to it and another team had already been here. She had originally thought a small squad had worked here, but judging by the wounds inflicted and everyone killed by the same weapon, she wondered if it was the man who had come to the secret area alone. But Captain Zhang didn't know anyone who could handle so many monsters alone, especially from the remains of the bodies. It was obvious that this was clearly the work of a high-level professional. Suddenly, she heard a strange sound that meant someone was rapidly approaching her. After a moment, she saw the monsters running at her with weapons. A guy came out of nowhere. He lunged in front of her, ready to fend off the monsters. Seeing him fight, Zhao thought that although he was low level, his fighting skills were top-notch. Apparently, the guy was seriously injured, severely affecting his abilities. If he was an ordinary person, he would have died long ago under the pressure of these monsters. Thinking he was able to make the most of the situation, the girl went to his aid. She killed the demons one by one, not giving the guy a chance to make a hit. Using her abilities, Captain Lin easily managed to bring the opponent's head down with a single blow. As a result, she alone handled all the monsters, and the guy just stood there watching. Then she asked what his name was and what team he was from. But what interested her most was how he had ended up in such an area all alone. It was Xiao. He looked too tired, so he was in no hurry to answer her questions. After a moment, his strength left his body altogether and he collapsed to the ground. He was unconscious. He looked very bruised and covered in wounds. The girl was surprised that he fainted. She thought he was worthy of her respect, but other monsters were approaching, and now the boy was a burden to her. This time, even more monsters arrived. They were intent on killing her without slowing down, and the girl had no choice but to start defending this guy, even though she really didn't like it. Seeing the monsters reminded her of her father. They were a good opportunity to vent her anger. She hated monsters with all her spirit. In this world, they deserved nothing less than death. Her crew stood at the portal to the secret area as usual and waited for the captain. According to their calculations, the captain should have returned by now. And besides, mopping up an area like this didn't require high-level abilities. They began to discuss her father's heroic act and suddenly saw her coming back. But to their surprise, Captain Jong did not return alone. On her shoulder was someone unconscious. They wondered who this guy was. Was he a monster from the secret realm? There are a huge number of camps scattered along the vast front line. A quarter of the people living in these camps are professionals, though they had infused themselves into all spheres of society. But healing and saving lives still rested on the shoulders of ordinary people. Xiao was taken to the 5th Military Camp Hospital. His condition was already stable, but all his organs were damaged. Not every professional could have survived that, let alone an ordinary person. His regeneration has avoided permanent damage even in the short time he's been here. There's also radiation from his body. As for the burns on his face, they're also caused by radiation. The doctor said he had a good prognosis and would recover quickly, especially if he hired high-level healers. But a man intervened and told Xiao to be discharged. It was the commander-in-chief of the military camp, Liang Zhenye. Neither captain nor doctor had expected to see him, much less had they expected such an order. Meanwhile, rumors of what had happened in Dahi had reached military camp number 3. TV showed those who gave their lives to save others. Captain Lin's father, Commander Jiang, was among them. She watched the news in silence. Suddenly, the commander-in-chief of the military camp quietly said that Jiao had died with honor. Lin just nodded. Then he said that the media wanted to interview her, but he declined on her behalf. He added that her father had made the right choice. If they were in his shoes, they would have done the same. So, don't blame him. The commander's fault was that she was fighting herself. Afterward, he left her, and the girl was left sitting beside Xiao alone with her thoughts. Offhandedly, the commander-in-chief added that when the guy wakes up, let him give her some advice on how to fight. The one who is able to control this sword is truly special. The girl wondered what kind of sword he was talking about, and asked if he knew the guy. He left without saying anything to her, though he clearly heard her question. The commander sat looking at the guy. She was insanely curious to know who he was, but she could only wait for the moment he came to his senses. Suddenly, Xiao woke up. He abruptly opened his eyes and glared at the girl with anger. She didn't know what to expect next from a guy she knew absolutely nothing about, so she went for her weapon just in case. She sat down beside him again with the thought of being scared of someone for the first time. The guy slowly started to come to his senses and said that the IV could be removed already. He soon realized where he was and asked what number this military camp was. The girl said she was the one who pulled him out of the secret area and introduced herself. He introduced himself in return. There was silence between them for a moment. Xiao seemed to realize that it was the commander's daughter. There was talk on TV about Musk's sudden disappearance and his irresponsibility. And if something like that happens again, he should be the first to nail down the scene and pay his debt to the Federation. Lin said that shifting blame to others only shows fear. She added that Musk is really something. When he's around, you can blame all the problems on him, and when he's not, you can blame him. She told Xiao that he could stay at the camp as long as he wanted, just as long as he didn't cause trouble, and that his abilities are good, but she could still break all his bones if she needed to. He listened to her carefully and replied that she couldn't do it. He was out of her league. She got a little angry and replied that she would now wait for the day when they could check it out. She couldn't waste any more of her time on the guy, and had to head out to mop up the areas. There was a team waiting for her outside the door. They were curious about the guy's condition and why the commander wanted to bring him back to headquarters. They had many questions, but none of them could be answered by the girl. She only said his name, Xiao Qiu. The boys thought the name seemed familiar for some reason. They thought they had seen him on television. They sensed that the captain was very angry, and realized that this anger would soon come out. Suddenly they noticed that Xiao had come out of his room and was heading somewhere. They came closer to inquire where he was going in such a state. He could barely stand on his feet, yet he replied that he was heading to a secret area. His condition was most likely due to his heart merging with the heart of a great demon, and his body craving the energy of life. When he kills monsters, he can absorb their energy, and thus heal his wounds. The guys inquired if Xiao had a team. It was forbidden to enter the secret area without one, but then they let the guy go. They'd benefit from having someone handle one area for them. Suddenly in the hallway, they saw the commander-in-chief walking to meet them. He heard about Xiao Qiu's intention, and said that he didn't mind if he went to the secret area. Team Lin thought it was against the rules, but he replied that the commander is here and he will decide if it's against the rules or not. Then he added that in order for the guys not to loiter, part of the team would go to help Jiang Ling, and part would go with Xiao. At this time, Captain Jong was already ready to head to the next secret area. She was barely caught up with the guys from the team, but it wasn't clear to her why there were only two of them. They talked about the situation at the hospital, and that the commander had sent some of the team with Xiao. Lin wondered how arrogant he was if he decided to go on a sweep right after waking up. It's a pointless risk where his life is at stake. She even felt sorry for the boys for going with him. But then she said they didn't know the whole situation and he might have his own motives. Meanwhile, the guys who had gone with Xiao all the way were praising Jiang Lin and trying to find out if he was related to the commander-in-chief. But Xiao replied that he didn't know him and had nothing to do with him. It was strange for the guys to hear that since he was considered legendary. The commander-in-chief fought face-to-face with Musk when the front line was just being established. He belonged to the army of Confrontation. And even now he possessed skill even though he had lost his sight. Xiao remembered this army and thought how long ago it had been. In the beginning, when Musk still had no reputation, he led 3,000 men and went to the front lines to fight monsters. Countless monsters were continuously attacking the fending humans. Despite all the pessimistic views, the army proved that humanity is ready to fight demons. After several hours of long conversations, they arrived at the portal to yet another secret area. Even though they didn't trust Xiao, they were willing to watch his back. After all, he was trusted by the commander-in-chief. Xiao wondered with surprise if they were serious about covering him. He didn't see the need for it and was sure he could do it himself just fine. When he got to the secret area, he felt that it was just crawling with monsters, just as he wanted. At that point, he'll be able to stop controlling himself and just kill. His body has not yet fully recovered from the nuclear bomb strike. Therefore, at the moment, he could only maintain his demon form for 3 minutes. But to kill all those monsters should be quite enough. He killed the monsters one by one, and the great demon's heart absorbed all their energy, after which his wounds were healed, and his time in this form increased. Meanwhile, part of Lin's team was waiting for Xiao near the portal. They were interested in whether or not the guy would be dead when they entered the secret area. Suddenly they saw Xiao coming back. He looked much better than before. He also completed the task much faster than anticipated. They couldn't believe that he had managed to handle the boss alone in such a state. She said that all the monsters were of a very weak level, including their boss. In addition, he had cleared the level 5 area in only 17 minutes. Even though Captain Zhang's record was half an hour. But Xiao didn't hesitate and said that he was heading to the next secret area and didn't need to rest. He cleared the secret areas one by one in a matter of minutes and moved on. In the end, when Jiang Lin's team arrived at the next secret area, it was already closed. They noticed that the footprints near the gate looked fresh. Accordingly, they were walking at someone's heels. This was the 5th secret area that the unknown team had cleared instead of them. In their opinion, it could have been a team from another military camp, which was why they were able to mop up so many areas so quickly. Most likely, they had come to appropriate their resources, but the captain didn't think it was a bad thing that someone wanted to help them. She ordered the team back to camp, but actually planned to go back alone to find out who it might be. Upon returning to camp, each team should report the results of the hike and awards received. The camp was surprised to hear that Xiao had managed to clear 17 secret areas in just one day, but everything on the energy map made it clear that these areas no longer existed. They were required to prove that they were the ones who did it. And then Team Xiao poured a huge mountain of rewards received onto the table. They were confused as to who this guy was, because even Captain Jiang Lin wasn't capable of such a thing. And she was considered the best in the camp. In front of him stood a high-class professional appointed by the commander-in-chief himself. His name was Xiao Qiu. At that time, he would suggest Xiao to go to the 6th level secret area where 2 teams had already died. But Xiao took this offer without a second thought. He was quite bored of killing monsters from the lower levels. The guy from Team Lin admired that Xiao was much stronger than even their captain. It was at this moment that Zhang Ling was standing behind his back, and was very angry upon hearing this. She immediately asked Xiao if he was the one who had cleaned up the areas that were in her plan. He nodded, and the girl said she wasn't surprised by his confidence now, even when he was bedridden. Xiao wasn't bothered by it. He wondered how long the captain would take offense at him. Then the captain said that she too was willing to take on the 6th level task that was assigned for Xiao. She offered to test who would get to the boss of the secret area first. It would show who was the strongest among them. Without waiting for an answer, she set off with her team. The guy noticed that Xiao had actually succeeded in igniting Captain Zhang Lin's competitive spirit. Looking at the secret area of the 6th level, Xiao finally realized why the system had brought him here. And he also remembered one important thing that happened on the front lines after the incident with the great demon in his past life. The guy with the team looked at his face and the blade, and suddenly remembered where Ego had seen him before. The next day, he went at once to military headquarters to report his speculation. He informed the commander-in-chief that this guy was that Xiaoqiu who had raised an entire company in Dahe. The commander suggested that it might just be a coincidence. It is unlikely that a criminal who has already been caught would go to the front line on his own, but the guy said the hair and body structure match. Plus his sword is identical to the perp's. He most likely escaped when there was a great demon attack in Dahe and utter chaos reigned. Team member Jiang Lin knew that he was doing the right thing in case Xiao was indeed a bad guy. The next day, Captain Lin and her team arrived at the gate to the 6th-level secret area. They wanted to go with the captain, especially after 2 teams had already died in this area. This time, she allowed the team to go with her, but ordered her not to interfere with her competition with Xiao in any way. Xiao also arrived at his destination. He decided to enter first. When they entered the secret area, they first began to explore the area. They realized that fighting in such a confined space would not lead to anything good. If there are a lot of opponents, the team simply won't have anywhere to retreat to. Hundreds of voices were coming from the depths of the area. The monsters appeared to be many. Already in a few seconds, they were throwing themselves at the professionals. There were so many of them that some of the guys were even scared. Commander Zhang Ling didn't wait and pierced all the crocodiles with lightning. She managed to kill hundreds of monsters with just one blow. The team admired her. But the girl ironically replied that she was just lucky because of the way they lined up. Everyone has noticed that the captain intends to go all out, and it won't be easy to defeat her. But Xiao thought to himself that he didn't really understand what they were competing in. Whether it was the number of monsters killed or the number of bosses. They continued to move inside for over 10 minutes now, but there was still no second wave of monsters. It was strange that they had lost 2 teams in this secret area, but there was no sign of their belongings or bodies here. Then they assumed that those teams had died back in the first wave of monsters, and their remnants had been scattered by the captain's lightning strike. Suddenly, an incomprehensible sound began to echo behind the wall. In their opinion, it couldn't be monsters. Everything inside the area began to tremble, and they prepared to defend themselves in case of an attack. Suddenly, they saw a huge crocodile rushing toward them in such a way that everything shook. It was so huge that it covered the entire passage. It was not clear how to fight it. Captain Jiang Ling wondered why her team was so scared. It was only a monster. But she was surprised when she smelled an aura of fear emanating from this demon. She took it simply as a cheap trick and set out to attack her supposed opponent. Watching everything, Xiao sensed that there was someone else under the ground. He thrust his sword into the ground with all his might. At this time, Captain Zhang successfully attacked the monster and was able to kill it with just one strike. When she turned around to look at the team, she saw another monster. As it turned out, he was underground. Only Xiao realized this, so he killed him. All in all, Xiao felt resentful that he was here with Lin, her team. Otherwise, he would have handled all the monsters in a couple minutes in his monster semblance. Lin realized that she was completely focused on the monster in front of her, and if it wasn't for Xiao, her team would have been long gone. Everyone wondered how he had figured out the second demon. He answered that it was by vibration. But the guys thought it was impossible as they couldn't hear anything because of such a strong earthquake. Xiao didn't know how to explain everything to them without giving himself away. It was very easy for him to recognize this noise that the monsters were making underground. In any case, the team was happy that they had managed to kill 2 bosses at once. Besides, they were rank 6. But Commander Jiang interrupted their joy, saying that they weren't bosses, but ordinary monsters, otherwise the reward chest would have already appeared. In addition, the teleport gate didn't appear either, meaning that the mission wasn't over and they needed to move on. The guys were shocked. If these monsters weren't the boss, then what kind of power does the boss have then? The captain ordered them to move on, and it wasn't long before they came upon a huge door. The boss was probably hiding behind that door. Lin suggested that she and Xiao go there together, and ordered the boys to wait outside. They didn't mind as they realized that there was certain doom waiting for them. So they just wished Xiao and Zhang good luck. Once inside, the captain saw a huge humanoid. The more human-like they are, the more dangerous they are. This species was capable of storing an incredible amount of power. They both prepared for battle. Zhang decided to attack first, and launched her spear at the monster, which was heading towards the boss at the speed of sound. Xiao appreciated this technique, calculating that if the monster decided to bite the spear, it would be pierced through. But no one expected the monster to be so much smarter and stronger. He caught the spear and struck the girl, who was holding the other end of it, right against the ground. Jin realized that she had to do something immediately, or he would just kill her. The captain drew her weapon and shot the monster right in the face. She blew half its face off. She said that the move was quite risky, and wondered if she always fought like that. She replied that you can't achieve great things in this life without putting your life on the line. Suddenly, the girl looked at the slain monster. Underneath its appearance was a human face. She looked closer and was shocked at what she saw. It was Christian. He was a military man from the H1 military camp, a rank 6 professional like her. He had his own team. According to the reports from headquarters, his team was the first to disappear. I wondered how he'd turned into a monster. There was clearly something wrong with this area, and Jiao was determined to find out what it was. Suddenly, dozens of monsters like the one she had just killed appeared in front of them. It was probably Christian's team. They decided to divide them amongst themselves. The captain took the ones on the left, and Xiao the ones on the right. Using her element lightning, Jong could kill several monsters at a time. She was proficient with a spear, though killing them wasn't easy. The girl noticed that after turning into monsters, their strength and agility had increased significantly. But due to their lack of intelligence, they were still stupid monsters. She noticed that Xiao hadn't had time to deal with his monsters yet. And while he was fighting, the girl had time to check the corpses. They were professionals who had come here to clean up the secret area. But there was still something Captain Zhang Ling couldn't understand. She looked at the remaining monsters with astonishment. They were behaving very strangely. There were altars in the room, and these monsters started worshipping them and summoning someone. It was apparent that there was an unknown energy gathering near the altars. Eyes appeared in front of them. Jiang started to get short of breath just from looking into them. It was obvious that what the monsters were doing had to be interrupted without slowing down. Otherwise, there was no telling how it might turn out. She took her spear and threw it straight at the monsters, piercing them both in one blow. The idols disappeared. Zhang wondered whose eyes were looking at them and who they were going to summon. Xiu knew that it was a demon god living in the void, and he was only looking at the guy. He thought that eventually they might even be called old acquaintances. After that, Zhao and Jin decided to return to the team that was waiting for them outside. The guys were glad that they had managed to kill the boss of this mysterious area, especially so quickly. They started asking what the thing looked like and if it was really strong. But the captain said she would answer all the questions later. Now she had to go back to the camp and report to the commander. The team didn't understand what was going on, but it was clear that something very serious had happened. Suddenly they heard a voice. It was the commander, who had decided to visit the scene. They hadn't expected it at all. They wondered what he had come to them for. Behind his back were the defense forces, and the guy who reported on Xiao was glad of it. The guys wondered why the commander came with a law enforcement team. He replied that they should have no cause for concern, for it did not concern them. But he added that it was closely related to Xiao, and turned towards him. And then he asked if he might better be called the Butcher of Dehi Town. The whole team, along with Captain Zezen, were in a stupor. Only one person was happy. They thought the commander was joking. Why would a criminal travel such a long way from Dahe to the front line? He seemed to them unlike a man who could commit such a crime. Then the redhead on the team said it was definitely the Butcher. He had been secretly watching him all the time and making up facts. Captain Jian moved closer and looked into Xiao's eyes. She was surprised, and then the guy confidently replied that he was indeed the same Xiaoqiu. He asked the commander-in-chief what would be done with him now. Would he be sent to the City of Stars? The commander replied that according to the laws of the Federation, OD must arrest Xiao. The only suitable place for a criminal was the redemption camp. However, its seizure is justified only by the laws of the Federation. And that has nothing to do with Camp N3. The law enforcement team was puzzled. Why they were called here in the first place? The commander said he had it all figured out, and if he were Xiao, he would have done the same thing. And perhaps his actions towards these people would have been much harsher. This time could only become the prime era if everyone became at least a little bit like Xiao. That was the end of the matter. And the commander ordered that the matter not be raised again. Otherwise, he will be forced to ask to leave the military camp. Captain Zhang Ling decided to walk over and ask the commander a question. The team was curious about what Jiang and Xiao encountered in the secret area. They were behaving rather strangely. They wanted to ask Xiao about it, but they were afraid to even approach him. Jin told everything to the commander, and asked if he knew anything about this altar, and why the monsters prayed to it. He replied that he knew what it was about. It was a demon god. Zhang was surprised. She didn't know that monsters could be gods. He said that there are thousands of such Jiao-like teams on the front lines. They kill thousands of monsters, and clear hundreds of areas, and the monsters could never break through them because of the source. Until it's destroyed, the war won't end. They never block the source, and as long as it exists, secret areas will appear again and again. Zhang wondered why this source hadn't been wiped out yet back then. The source of the secret realms is a demon god. He's also the master of that altar they saw. They are very powerful, and even a natural disaster is just a grain of sand against them. But there are people who have been given the power to kill these gods, and it has happened more than once. But nowadays there's only one person who can do that. The girl realized it was the mask. The appearance of the altar indicates that the demon god is awakening. And if a breakthrough happens, monsters will come from everywhere, destroying everything around them. They would sweep away all these camps without blinking an eye. Jiao knew that even when Musk was here, thousands of soldiers had died. And now that he's not with them, there's no telling what price will have to be paid. He had instructed that the secret areas would not be cleared from this day forward. The girl would have to personally deliver letters from the commander to the other camps. He recommended taking this opportunity to take a break, since she would need a lot of energy very soon. Just like that, he also asked to take Xiaoqiu with him to deliver the letters. And in order for Xiao to now feel at ease with the other professionals, he needed to change his appearance. The commander instructed Jian to prepare a mask for him. Soon the team with the captain and Xiao set off on an armored train to deliver important letters. Judging by their calculations, very soon they should have reached the second camp. They were very curious about what was so important in those letters that they needed to pass it on in person. They suggested that they were probably classified documents that were very dangerous to send over the internet. Suddenly they heard a strange sound. They looked out the window and saw that someone was following them. It must be a squad from the M2 military camp. The team wondered what they were doing here. They assumed that the demons had broken out during the sweep of the secret area. If you don't clear the secret area in a certain amount of time, the monsters will break the seal and break out. That's what happened. Their car was chased by several monsters who managed to escape. The soldiers were angry that no one from headquarters was sending them help. These monsters were rank 4. Suddenly, the soldiers ran out of arrows. One of the monsters had gotten quite close and was ready to strike when suddenly someone killed it. The soldiers rejoiced that reinforcements had arrived just in time. They looked around and saw the armored train very close by. That's where the monsters were firing from. But for some reason, they started shooting at their car. The monsters started attacking from all sides. One of them was neutralized with a shot right in the head. Suddenly, the car of the military camp M2 flew up and overturned. Then they realized they were being rescued. The armored train stopped abruptly, and Xiao, Captain Jian and her team ran out of it in a flash. At the same instant, they rushed to destroy the demons. The soldiers were worried that there were so many monsters. But then they watched in amazement as their parts flew off in all directions. They didn't understand how that was possible, and they didn't even realize that this team was that strong. They soon saw that indeed the strongest among them were the girl and the masked guy. Yan said to carry the injured to the train and to be extremely careful while cleaning and gathering ingredients. The soldiers came closer and asked if they were from the military camp H3. They had heard about Captain Jian and that her main weapons were lightning control and spear. However, they noticed that the guy in the mask was as good as the captain. The soldiers didn't know that H3 had another person with similar power. One of them blurted out that this guy was Xiaoqiu, and he had just recently joined. The soldier said it was the first time he had heard the name, but he was sure this guy would soon be as famous as the captain. Jian asked what exactly their group was doing that they were being chased by such a crowd of monsters. Turns out they were just cleaning up the secret areas. But many of the secret areas had broken seals, and the monsters had escaped. There were originally 15 people on their team, but they were not the only group that went on the mission that day. Jin realized that this was a sign of the coming influx of monsters. They had only managed to reach the 5th military camp, and the situation had already gotten so bad. The captain gave the order to pack. They needed to get to Camp M2 as soon as possible. Meanwhile, at the military camp post, they noticed an armored train approaching. Only 10 teams have returned in the last 2 days, although more than 30 went. But so far, no one was too worried. They hoped that the teams had simply continued their sweep of the areas, for their numbers had increased dramatically lately. A little later, they saw that it was not their armored train. It was from another military camp. Just as the signalman was commanding the train to slow down and stop for inspection, the unthinkable happened. The armored train failed to comply and drove straight into the wall, shattering it. A huge cloud of dust and smoke rose up. The soldiers didn't understand what was wrong. Suddenly the hatch of the vehicle opened, and a bloody guy with a knife in his hand fell out. The soldiers noticed that this wounded guy is a pro. But then they saw something else that frightened them greatly. In front of them stood a huge monster, a mutant of a man and a bee. The baggage compartment of the armored train opened, and a swarm of huge bees burst from there. The soldiers realized that the monsters had attacked the military camp. The soldiers had minimal weapons with them, and were not prepared to repel the enemy's attacks. He began bombing the camp. The main monster was watching everything. Everything was going according to plan. His name is Scratch. Meanwhile, In the armored train of the H3 military camp, discussions were going on about the possible development of the situation. The aggrieved soldiers were frightened and asked if their camp could have been attacked. They thought it was impossible. Their captain was a professional of the 7th rank. He would have handled it with ease. Jong replied that she would like to believe it. But if it was an influx of monsters, but a professional of even level 9 wouldn't be able to handle it. As they approached their camp, they saw that it was all on fire. They heard a message on the radio saying the captain was dead. They asked for help. As they got closer, they saw that the M2 military camp had fallen to the monster invasion. But Jong gave orders not to change direction and keep moving towards the camp to rescue the survivors and know the details. Everyone talked about how everything was quiet while Musk was with them. It's like the monsters found out he was gone. To lighten the mood, everyone started to joke about Xiao, saying that he had become very similar to the mask after he started wearing the mask. Then Xiao said in a serious tone that he was indeed an Musk. But no one took his words seriously, and Zhao said she would see if he lived up to the name. Jang looked out the window of the armored train and wondered if it was the insect colony that was to blame for the fall of Camp M2. Suddenly they heard screams for help and then saw people running away. They were being chased by a swarm of insects. The captain immediately rushed to their aid and began destroying these monsters. After killing most half of the enemies, the rest decided to retreat and fled. People were thanking the captain for the rescue. If not for her, they would have gone to feed those animals. Then Jiang inquired about what really happened at the camp. The soldier replied that everything there now was destroyed and wiped out to dust. It was now monster territory. No one else survived. Even their captain died. He was killed by a humanoid monster. And he's very strong. Their captain was killed in less than half a minute, so going back there is suicide. Jiang pulled a gun on the guys. At first, no one realized what had happened. But then the captain said these guys were escaped prisoners from a military camp. She realized that they had killed the professionals accompanying these people by the fact that they had many weapons in their hands, but they didn't even know how to hold them properly. Realizing they had been figured out, the prisoners lunged at the captain and crew, but obviously that was a bad idea. She cut their heads off in one motion. Then Zhang said there was no point in heading to the camp anymore. Now they already knew what had merged, but they had a problem. The armored train's roster stopped working, due to the fact that they were constantly going at high speed. Suddenly, a survivor from the camp raised his hand and said he could fix it. It was a simple student, but she managed to fix the mechanism very quickly. That girl was Evelyn Clark. She dreamed of being the best mechanic in the whole world. With her help, the armored train continued on its way again. After the decision was made to leave the M2 military camp, everyone began discussing their next destinations. Everyone decided to head for the Yi5 camp, but Xiao insisted on L4. Besides, they would only have enough fuel to get to that camp. Therefore, they had no choice but to take a risk and venture to the L4 military camp, despite the fact that there were supposed to be monsters there. According to Xiao's memories from his past life, it was the Yi camps that fell first. That was when many control points stopped communicating with the outside world. Even though Xiao hurried as fast as he couldn't save them. They had turned into monster dwellings. The people in the armored train were very worried that they would have to face the monsters again, but the team assured them that they were being led by a professional guide, so the journey was completely safe. But they had no idea that the dragonfly monster had already noticed their movement. Soon through the window they saw a huge number of the same monsters that had attacked Camp M2. Jing thought that if the humanoid monster that killed the captain was here, it was unlikely that she too would have the strength to survive. The monster turned its attention to Zhang. He was preparing to destroy her. Ripping a paw off at one monster, he threw it right into the wheel of the armored train to stop its progress, and he succeeded. Suddenly the train started to slow down and turned over. Evelyn was surprised at the ease with which Xiao and Zhang put back the 10-ton train. Everyone was happy that no one was hurt in the accident, even though the train flipped over several times. After Captain Jong ordered everyone to immediately protect the train and prepare for defense. For Evelyn, she gave the task of checking all the faults of the armored train, and if possible repairing them as soon as possible. If they can't fix the train, they'll be stuck here for a long time. This will most likely lead to their death. She decided that by saving only the strong first, they might still have a future. There were a huge number of monsters. It was obvious that this fight was going to be tough. Captain Jong killed opponents so deftly that the soldiers began to doubt that she only had a rank 6. They watched her in surprise until the team said it was time for them to join in and help her. A humanoid demon was watching the monsters being killed from the side. Suddenly the people on the train noticed him and told the captain and Xiao about it. Captain Jong immediately rushed towards it, but all her attacks were unsuccessful. The monster was too strong and agile. But his attack was able to do serious damage to the captain. With one blow, he drove her into the ground. The team was scared for her. They saw that the monster immediately swarmed toward her again, but this time to finally finish the girl before she recovers from the previous attack. Unexpectedly for the monster, she gathered her wits and was able to fend off this attack. But it was too close. Before Jang knew it, a second later, the humanoid demon flew far away from Xiao's attack. The guy said he would take care of that demon and asked them to take care of the remaining monsters. Captain Jong, before she could even ask a question, Xiao had already gone to the demon. She asked him to come back alive. Xiao's punch threw the monster back hundreds of meters. He didn't expect to encounter such a strong opponent. Soon he saw the guy and marveled that he was the one who could do such a thing. But then he smelled Xiao's scent, and at first he thought he was a monster like that. But Xiao swiftly headed towards his opponent and took off his mask with the words that he was neither. Added that right now the description monster would suit him best. Then he took on the form of a demon and was ready to strike at his opponent. Or rather, to kill him. He picked up the sword and thought he could finally unleash his power. As soon as Xiao turned into a monster, anxiety flared up in the insect's heart. He thought he should attack first, for the advantage to be on his side. His punch shook everything around him, but Xiao didn't move an inch. He was even a little offended that it was the full power of an insect monster. The enemy continued to attack Xiao, but all was to no avail. And then he grabbed the humanoid's paw, with the words that that was enough. Now it was Xiao's turn to show the humanoid all her agility and strength. It had not expected such a thing. In his eyes, the insect saw a fierce and powerful monster. With one blow, he sliced it in half. The god-chosen monster was defeated. The blood raven blade absorbed the blood of the mind-altering god. The second stage of the monster blade's evolution had begun. As a result, the raven blade gained a new ability. It was now capable of turning a flock of crows into blood-sucking enemies. Xiao looked at the blade with a sense of pride and said that it had become stronger again. Meanwhile, the captain's crew killed all the insects. The people in the armored train were unharmed. They wondered where Xiaoqiu was, and assumed that the guy wouldn't sacrifice himself for her. The girl didn't know what to say to them. She didn't understand anything herself. Suddenly, they noticed Xiao in the distance. He was returning safe and sound. They were very curious if Xiao had managed to defeat the monster. He nodded his head and said that the monster was gone. The team was shocked. They thought Xiao had raised his rank even higher. After what happened and went on to other military camps, Jian was a little embarrassed, but she still thanked Xiao. If it wasn't for him, she would probably be dead by now, the girl said. The rate at which his power increased defies all logic, just like the legendary Musk. The conversation was interrupted by Evelyn. The girl reported that the radio equipment was probably malfunctioning. They could not contact the nearest camp. She doesn't think the problem's on their end. It's like someone's blocking their signal. Not only were they unable to receive the message, they were unable to send it. They were isolated. Suddenly, Xiao was given a new assignment. His goal was to destroy an invasion of monsters. The reward for this was partial evolution into a demon god. After a while, they did manage to get a message from the L4 military camp. Jang looked at Evelyn with disbelief. The girl said that it really didn't work yesterday. The girl came up to answer. She said they were coming from the M2 military camp. There are civilians with them. In response, they heard that their message had been received. They were asked to go to Camp L4 as soon as possible. They make the decision to drive there, as their fuel is running low, and it takes less than 3 hours to get there. To a friend they heard another short message. It said not to trust the L4 camp. There are monsters there. They did not understand how this was possible, because monsters do not have intelligence, and how they managed to imitate human speech. Jong asked who was sending this message and why he was saying that L4 had been taken over by monsters. They were the survivors of the attack. The monsters attacked their camp 2 days ago. They have the intelligence of humans. 3 rank 8 professionals and their camp commanders died. They also gave the ordinates of the shelter where the survivors of the camp were hiding. They added that they were taking a big risk sending this message and asked to be directed to them. No one knew what to do. It could have been a trap. L4 was one of the main cities that could hardly be captured so easily. Opinions were divided, and Zhang asked Xiao for her opinion. Whether it was worth going to the camp. He said confidently that there was no need to go to either place. Both places are traps. The reason why the front line disappeared so quickly in the past life was because some demons were endowed with intelligence. Monsters could disguise themselves, deceive and enslave humans, and force them to commit countless atrocities. According to his recollections, however, the L4 military camp did not fall at the beginning. Apparently, because there was no mask in this world, The demon god was able to expend more energy to create monsters to attack the front lines. Since the armored train had only 4 hours worth of fuel, they decided to move toward the temporary camp. As soon as they reached the given coordinates, there was indeed a camp built by humans in front of them, and those who came out to meet them were indeed survivors of the L4 military camp, except that the monsters have already managed to enslave them and make them their hand-me-downs. They made them pretend to be ordinary survivors and lure other camps to them. As long as they did that, they were allowed to live. However, before they could even attack, Xiao had interrupted them all. Although they managed to clear the camp quickly, they still managed to kill the 4 people Evelyn had brought with her. Based on what they learned in the temporary camp, the monsters also shut down the radio and other systems in Camp L4. This said that the monster's attack was coordinated, something that had never happened on the front lines before. This monster possessed a not-so-terrifying power, a mind-altering power. So he decided to become someone who kills not by force, but by intellect. Not only is he selective in his methods, he's also skilled in disguise. He's pretty hard to find. Jong asked Xiao what the name of his sword was. It was a gift from a friend. The sword was called Soaring Raven. Xiao had once killed this friend because he had become a monster. Suddenly, the captain's team noticed an invasion of monsters. They were moving towards Camp A1. Their armored train was headed the same way toward this camp. On the other side, they saw many military vehicles that were heading for the Mostrovs. They split into groups, trapped them, and covered them with artillery fire. Captain Jean appreciated this tactic. It seemed like it was only a matter of time before the monsters were destroyed. Then they started moving toward the armored train. The crew rejoiced. Finally, at least someone was on their side. They came out to meet them, saying they were from a military camp. But those pointed their weapons at them and ordered no one to move. An older man got out of the car. He looked like a formidable guy. He repeated for everyone to be quiet. He considered Zhang's team as traitors, since they had come out the same side as the monsters, but managed to survive. Suddenly they saw their commander-in-chief. He bore the marks of battle. The commander said we shouldn't touch these guys. He knows them. Then they went as far as the military camp A1 to the quarantine zone. Before that, it had been a regular prison. Everyone was locked in there, as there is no quick way to identify traitors. He went to Captain Jong and listened to her version of how they survived. The commander-in-chief reported that everyone from Camp H3 managed to survive. They managed to evacuate before the monsters arrived. Jong realized that the situation was serious. Otherwise, the top leadership wouldn't have left entire camps built for huge sums of money. She asked why many monsters have gained a mind that is comparable to a human's. He replied that it was most likely related to the monster gods. He didn't know anything else. The captain and his crew will be under observation for a few more days. Once they realize they're not traitors, they'll be given a new assignment. They were severely understaffed. Zhang was in the cell with Xiao. He kept looking at something on the map. There was talk on TV that many congressmen were going to go to the front lines due to the circumstances. They urged everyone to put aside their fear of monsters as the Federation was ready to defend them. Zhang remarked that the situation on the battlefield is very tense, and the government is so calm in talking about it. Suddenly the soldiers arrived. They informed that their quarantine was cancelled as they were needed on the front lines. Upon receipt of the order, they were ordered to assemble at the place indicated. Departure today. The captain realized that the situation on the front lines was so dire that they were being sent out without making sure they were loyal. She said he needed one person, namely Evelyn Clark. They authorized her release. Afterward, they were taken to be introduced to their unit. It was made up of people from the redemption camp. That's all that's left. All the normal professionals were sent to the front lines a long time ago. The men of the redemption camp have extremely low combat skills, zero morale, and a complete disregard for orders. Later, they were given walkie-talkies, as at this point the monsters that were interfering with the electronics had been destroyed. They also had a privilege. They could choose where they went. The situation in the northwest was not good. That was where the monsters had focused their attacks. Xiyo replied without hesitation that that's where they would go. The soldier was surprised. He thought that Xiao hadn't heard that this was the most dangerous area. Xiaoyu said in a confident and calm tone that that was why he chose her. But as payment for his choice, he wants 20 military maps of the area, as well as stretch marks and miniaturized nuclear devices. Captain Zhang confirmed this choice. She wanted to go there too. He said he would try to get everything this team asked for, and now they have to put together a team and then go to the front lines. 2 hours later, they arrived at the site of the dormant volcano that Xiao had seen on the map in the camp. To many, it seemed unrealistic to contain monsters on such a difficult section of the front line. Xiao gave Evelyn the nukes and ordered her and Jiang to arrange them exactly as marked on the map. His current team was not particularly willing to listen to instructions. They had agreed only to get out of detention. Jong really didn't like this kind of rudeness, and killed one of the criminals without a second thought. Zhao didn't mind. Xiao then said that criminals have two choices: follow the instructions or die. At that moment, Evelyn saw that the defenses had fallen to the onslaught of monsters. They were now surrounded. The criminals did not realize that fighting monsters would be so dangerous and began to rebel. She said perfectly well that they're surrounded, so the criminals have no chance of escape. And now the monsters will tear them apart, but those who follow his orders will survive. He ordered them to divide into groups of 10, and issued each group a walkie-talkie. They had to report everything only to Xiao and only listen to him too. Each group went to a different location. The first to make contact was Group B. They encountered monsters. Xiao began issuing commands to all the groups to move. They were to move only as instructed. One of the team saw monsters. They looked pretty strange. They were saved only by the fact that there was a river between them. The criminals started pelting the opponents with grenades. There was a powerful explosion, but it didn't kill the monsters, but only gave the guys time to escape. Xiao instructed the other teams next. He definitely had a plan. He told the A team to detonate the mines from remote control in 4 seconds. He again instructed the groups to redeploy. And it turns out he was just leading the monsters at each other. All teams met in one place and, as directed, began throwing grenades at the monsters. Together they managed to fool the monsters and destroy them with fire. That's when the guys realized that if they followed his orders, they could actually survive. Once the groups from the redemption camp had completed their missions, everyone returned to the summit. Then, according to Xiao's plan, all the nuclear devices that had been placed around the volcano's hot spring were activated. The powerful explosion caused the crater of the extinct volcano to be completely destroyed, and at the same moment, a terrifying amount of water rushed from there. Countless rocks and trees formed a veritable avalanche. In the blink of an eye, the monsters that were in the vicinity were swallowed up by the unstoppable flow. The trap swung open. Everyone was happy that Xiao's plan had worked and they were saved. Just when the generals were shocked at the speed with which the monsters had taken over the front line, they received a report of a successful mission in the northwest. However, everyone present decided to attribute this victory to Sun Ming, He Yao, who had made no contribution throughout the battle. The authorities didn't want anyone to know it was handled by criminals. But they made a nice tin and took them off the volcano by airplane. The criminals thought they would get their sentences reduced for such work. But the authorities decided to simply put them back behind bars. The prisoners later learned that they had decided not to spread the word about their exploit, so riots broke out. The perpetrators were eventually killed for trying to start a riot. Meanwhile, Chairman Song decided to visit the commander-in-chief for a serious talk. They were worried that someone else would find out about the incident at the volcano. Because in addition to the criminals, there were people from other camps. As well, Song said that he had obtained a new weapon to execute their plan, and it was already on the front lines. The soldiers who were previously on the front lines were ordered to retreat as support from the Star City arrived. The monsters were about to get close to their place, and this team was outraged as they were already ready to repel the attack. Suddenly, this backup appeared in front of them. They were accompanied by scientists for some reason. These people had a very strange appearance. They were also wearing equipment they had never seen before. The doctors said the checkup was over, and thus gave permission to go into battle. They went on the attack. These guys had a special button on their suits that, when pressed, injected an injection into their bodies. Their minds were becoming completely clouded. The only desire was to kill. Only insane people who were willing to experiment on themselves could get into the special unit. These men were weapons in human form. They killed as if they had been doing it since birth. The soldiers watched in amazement. These people resembled monsters very much in behavior. They also turned out to be surprisingly strong and defeated the monsters in no time. Then they advanced into the thick of the monsters. Ordinary people thought it was suicide, but only under such conditions could the special unit demonstrate its power. Here, they restrained themselves. Suddenly, one of the special squad became too stuffy and took off his overalls. He looked like a real monster. He had a similar aura with these demons, but he wasn't like them. He was much stronger and crazier. He injected himself with a second injection for some real fun. This man became even crazier, but much stronger. He could crush a monster with one hand. The ordinary soldiers were shocked at what was happening. They managed to repel the attack, even though it seemed impossible. The result of these experiments far exceeded the government's expectations. Only 100 people could handle so many monsters. With the help of surgery and drugs, anyone can gain this kind of power. The special unit immediately asked for the next line of defense. They were out for blood, but suddenly one huge monster appeared. No one understood where it came from. It turned out to be made up of dead monster bodies, so the special unit decided to test their strength on him as well. But now their attacks weren't as successful. This monster was a rank 9 monster. Then the guy injected himself with another injection, although the doctor strictly forbade it. After that, right before his eyes, he grew several times his size. Hiding his appearance was impossible, but even another injection didn't produce the desired result. He was still unable to resist the monster. He took it with 2 hands and crushed it like an insect. Everyone was shocked. The monster killed this way on purpose. He enjoyed killing people. They flashed a call to the commander-in-chief's camp and reported the coming. He looked out his window outside the camp and saw some huge monsters there. He did not understand how so many natural disasters could exist. Ego was seized with rage. Yao's friend said that Musk was to blame for everything. The monster gods dared to act because of his absence. He acted recklessly and didn't even think about the social impact of his disappearance. Musk must be punished. The commander-in-chief marveled that even that could be pinned on Musk. Then Yao's friend added that in case of anything, you shouldn't consider him part of the army. He is only here to observe the fighting. He said to gather the troops assigned to be cannon fodder, and if the monsters managed to break through, to use nuclear weapons. The commander wondered if it was possible to use such a weapon. After all, their soldiers were on the battlefield. Toth replied that a small group of people would be sacrificed. If nuclear weapons were effective, they would no longer need professionals. The commander-in-chief was fine with that. Since then, he wouldn't have to risk his own life. He said he understood clearly and went to organize everything for their plan. At this time, Xiao and Jang arrived at the scene. They were ordered to quickly climb the wall. They looked around and saw some very strange monsters that were moving right towards them. Xiao sensed the aura of the monster god, alterable mind. Pretty soon, those monsters approached the camp. All the soldiers ran as far away as possible. They started throwing huge stones at the wall, which shattered it. Many soldiers could not stand on the wall afterward and fell down. Afterward, the 2 monsters picked up the 3rd monster in their arms and tossed him high up. With his own, he was able to finally break the wall so that other small monsters had a chance to sneak inside the camp. They began attacking the remaining soldiers and killing them mercilessly. Fortunately, Zhao and Jong were already there, trying to contain the invasion of these monsters. She said he had an idea on how to turn the situation in their favor but needed an hour to prepare. But they didn't have that much time. Monsters surrounded them on all sides. Jang said that if they both died here, it wouldn't be so humiliating. Though the girl had hated her father since her mother's death, his shadow was always there, like lightning. If she wasn't wearing a mask that suppresses powers, she would have already died from the lightning strike. She never understood why her father saved her mother during the monster influx. The girl was ready to die. Now was the time to go to her father and finally ask him that question. Suddenly, she stepped to the edge of the wall and jumped straight down to the monsters. In her mind, it wasn't suicide. She just couldn't take off. She killed small monsters as long as she could. But her main target was the biggest and most powerful one. When she got to him, she decided to strike with lightning with all her might, but was surprised that it didn't work at all and didn't do even minimal damage to him. Then the monster threw Captain Jang away with all its might. She was picked up by Xiao in time. She was completely unconscious, and Ai Xiao knew that she had put her best foot forward. It's just that the current her isn't able to do anything against a rank 8 monster. But the girl was wrong about one thing in his opinion. Xiao wasn't going to die here. Now he had the opportunity to take on a demonic form and fight the enemy for real. Xiao decided it was time to end this monster invasion. But as soon as he turned, the girl suddenly came to her senses. She couldn't believe that it was Xiao Qiu whom she thought she knew so well. But the guy didn't notice it. A battle with a strong opponent awaited him. He immediately flew upwards and used his sword to cut the monster's arm into many small pieces. Afterward, he delivered another blow. This time he slashed the monster's chest. He was so fast and agile that the monster had no time to react to his attacks. In just a moment, he had decapitated his opponent without much effort. The soldiers couldn't believe that someone could handle such a huge monster so easily. Chairman Sun and the commander-in-chief also watched this spectacle. Sun recognized the humanoid monster. He was also in Dahi, and he also noticed that this monster had turned from a human. He thought it would be great to catch it and send it to a lab for research. At this point, the commander-in-chief received a message informing him that nuclear weapons had been launched. A total of 35 warheads were released, which should kill the huge monster. The soldiers realized that they were just bait for the monsters and that the government didn't care. Sun watched everything coldly and said that the soldiers' sacrifices would not be in vain. Suddenly, they saw that a demon god had appeared on the battlefield. Sun didn't understand how he was able to break through the void and appear on the ground. There is some kind of network between the uncharted void and the land where people live, and monsters like shrimp can enter the earth through this network. Elemental-level monsters can be compared to a fish that calmly swims through, but the demon god is a cold-blooded and bloodthirsty white shark. Musk was convinced that there should be no compromise. Monsters deserve nothing less than annihilation. This is what caused the conflict between the Federation and Musk, which led to his expulsion. The demon god decided to intervene in the battle, and moved nuclear weapons that weren't just aimed at monsters. Sun didn't expect the demon god to use his spatial powers for this at all. The commander-in-chief didn't understand what was going on at all, and asked if there was anything he could do to this god. Chairman Sun at this moment decided to run away, under the pretext of needing to report on the situation in Star City. But the commander figured him out and said he had to go with him. Captain Jong didn't understand what it was. She looked at the monsters who worshipped the god, and Xiao was so engrossed in destroying the monsters that he only noticed the demon god's appearance after he was almost smashed against the wall. Jong noticed that this god was focusing his attention on Xiaoqiu. She didn't see the point that a god who could summon a rank 9 monster in a second paid attention to a human. She realized that the only one who could be treated that way was Musk. She watched what was happening. Xiao looked at the demon god with a piercing gaze, and to her surprise, fear came from the god. He decided to disappear for some reason. The huge monsters that were so hard to kill petrified and scattered in a minute. The monsters that were heading towards the camp began to retreat for some unknown reason. The soldiers began to rejoice at the fact that the monsters had escaped and they were able to survive. Xiao lay there and thought that the demon god was as cowardly as he remembered him to be. When he entered the void in his past life, the wayward mind would immediately hide. But once he gave up the identity of the mask and released his power, he finally gained courage. Xiao would never have thought that he was so afraid of him that he would tuck his tail and run away. If he analyzed the guy, he would realize that with his 13th level, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the current Xiao. But Xiao accomplished the mission, and was rewarded with a partial evolution into a demon god. Xiao felt that this energy was filled with insane will. Suddenly he saw the chairman with other soldiers in front of him. They were wondering what he was. Suddenly Jean stood up for him, saying that it was Xiaoqiu, her teammate, and he's a human, not a monster. Sun began to say that Xiao was the ultimate monster, and he was the cause of the other demons. The captain didn't understand, if he was a monster, why he was fighting against his own. The commander-in-chief ordered her to shut her mouth. She wouldn't dare defend a monster. He said if they're on the same team, they're both working for the enemy. He said that as the commander-in-chief of monster fighting, he arrests them. His subordinates approached to grab Xiao and the captain, but he brushed them off without blinking an eye. The commander-in-chief decided to personally arrest him, so he attacked Xiao. But he didn't succeed. Su also tried to capture it and was defeated as well. Then Xiao decided that the chairman didn't deserve the right to live and killed him in front of everyone. And afterward, he took on the commander-in-chief, who, after what he had seen, tried to escape. He killed them so cold-bloodedly, it didn't seem like the Xiao the captain knew. She was watching from the sidelines, and she didn't know if she was doing the right thing when she went to his defense. At this moment, the commander-in-chief of the military camp arrived on the scene. He got down on one knee in front of Xiao. He said he'd lost his eyesight a long time ago, but he'd gained an excellent sense of smell, so he knew who he was from the beginning. He called him Musk, and he was very happy to have him back. He had been waiting for this return, and ran that along with other battle veterans to help regain control of everything that should belong to Musk. But Xiao didn't say anything in response and simply fled the scene. After that, the Federation held a formal presentation in the City of Stars. According to them, it was only through the efforts of their government that humanity was able to defeat the monsters. But they also showed a picture of Xiaoqiu, Captain Jong and her crew, calling them traitors who cooperated with the monsters. Xiaoqiu, who betrayed humanity and became a pet of the monsters, was most guilty of everything. But the Federation promises that all traitors will surely be caught and brought to justice. Suddenly, on a building across the street, the reporters saw a man with a sword in his hand. Everyone recognized Xiao and started to scatter. They were scared out of their wits. The soldiers tried to stop him, but obviously they couldn't. Xiao entered the hall. His silhouette seemed very familiar to the president. Then he remembered that this was the same Xiaoqiu he had once fought side by side with. And also, this is the man he recently accused of crimes. But Xiao walked and looked through him. The president was not worthy of his attention. He realized it himself. He fell into despair as he constantly compared himself to Musk. But then he decided that this time, he had a chance to prove himself. He will be able to defeat the enemy and earn the respect and love of his people. If he injects himself with the newly developed compound, he'll become a monster like him. He persuaded himself to do so for a long time, but never dared to administer the injection. Xiao walked through him without paying any attention at all. He stood at the microphone and made a loud statement. The guy said he was Musk's ego. People thought it was a joke. How could this perp be Musk? Captain Jiang was also there. Her surprise was no less than the others. She said he didn't come back as a hero. Humanity never needed a hero. He was the one it needed. And only he could lead them out of the abyss and give them hope. He added that the current government was forcing them to experience SRH and expel Musk. But this time he's here to devastate their resources to increase his own power. The Musk they knew would hardly say such a thing. Often he just kept quiet and behaved with restraint. But this guy has declared that from now on, this world belongs to him. Then Jong realized why the commander had said such a thing back then. He knew it was Musk from the beginning. She understood why He Xiaoqiu had told her all about the demon gods. People began to praise Xiao and bowed their heads before him. Xiao was pleased with himself. In his mind, he turned to the demon gods and said that he was waiting for them.